4th year in this role. I still dream of making Providence a model of urban education in America. While we have come a long way, I will never forget where I come from. My life experience mirrors the life experience of many of my students. I have endured homelessness, food insecurity, dropout from high school. I was a candidate for GED. I kept asking myself one question. What if? What if earned me a GED? Continue asking myself what if, and it then took me to the next level, which now I earned my doctorate. I take pride that I am the first superintendent in recent memory to have worked my way up through the district as a teacher, an assistant principal, and now superintendent. And I have not forgotten what it's like to be in a classroom neither. I'm at home in a classroom. I share that I did not have a home and support systems. Hope High School was my lifeline. I also share that my family is rooted here in Providence. My children attended PPSD school, and I still have family who are attending PPSD schools. So, Mr. President, rest assured that I will continue to take this position seriously and give it my all. Being the superintendent is not a stepping stone for me, but an opportunity to lay the stepping stones for the current and future students. My legacy is not my story. My legacy is the combined stories of our incredible students, a legacy that will be built by a stronger school system that helped them write the next chapter in the stories of our city and beyond. So thank you once again for giving me this opportunity. It is an honor to be here with you again.
Thank you, Superintendent. Are we all set with the audio on the live stream?
Yes, sorry about that.
Thank you very much. So prior to approving the agenda, I want to amend the agenda. I'd like to entertain a motion to move item 4.1, which is the discussion and possible vote, to occur after the presentation.
Mr. President, we have Michaelina, I think that's gonna be leaving early. We can change this action item and actually vote on it now.
I think it would be prudent to listen to the presentation before calling the vote, Mr. Lee.
I'll try to stay as long as I can.
All right, so why don't we do this? Why don't we move the presentation up? So move item 10.1 up to now. Or do we want public comment first? It's only one person. I say we move the presentation up to now. Jeremy, if there's no problem, you're the only person that signed up for public comment. All right, let's move the presentation up till now. So do I have a motion to move item 10.1 to item 2.2, I guess, or
Motion.
there's a motion, do I have a second? All right, there's a second, all in favor? Any opposed? The ayes have, there's one name. All right, there's two. So we have we have an amended agenda, we have an approved amended agenda. So we're gonna take the presentation now. So, Mr. Darrow, Mr. Redden.
Chief of Staff describing Deputy Commissioner Roldan right now.
Okay, our apologies.
Okay.
Mr. Nina is having a health complication with his back, and we're trying to accommodate him the best we can. Welcome, Deputy Commissioner, Mr. Reddish, Mr. Darrow. Gentlemen, can begin when you're ready.
Thank you, and I apologize. I am literally in 3 meetings at once. So, but happy to be here. Thank you all. It's great to see all of you. Thank you for the opportunity to join you this evening. Mr. President, Superintendent, members of the board. I come to you with over 20 years of experience managing complex change under similar conditions. I come to you as a kid who was born in Puerto Rico with 9 brothers and sisters and grew up in Hartford's Stowe Village Housing Project and attended very similar schools just in the neighboring state. When I joined the team in 2020, I did so because I saw an opportunity to make a difference and was encouraged that so many people were demanding change. As Deputy Commissioner of RIDE, I have worked closely with district leadership to advance the priorities and goals included in the Providence Turnaround Action Plan, which I helped put together in 2020. Prior to my time here in Rhode Island, I worked for Hartford Public Schools, which also saw a state intervention. In my capacity in Hartford, I helped co-develop the district's reform strategy and was part of the team that dramatically improved student outcomes. I've seen the successes and challenges of interventions firsthand. I know the progress can be made when everyone prioritizes kids. Beyond my professional experience, after earning my doctorate from Harvard, I have taught urban education policy and change at Harvard, American University, and Brown. And I can tell you that from both my professional and academic experience, turnaround work, this is my ML accent coming right through for you there, it's just not easy. It really isn't. And decades of dysfunction certainly cannot be reversed overnight, but steady and consistent progress is completely possible. It's even more challenging when you face an unprecedented global crisis just a few months after the intervention began. No one has ever managed an intervention of this type and a pandemic at the same time. It's important to keep that context in mind because it seems like this was also long ago, but it was not, and we are still dealing with the impact of the pandemic today, and will continue to feel its effects in the foreseeable future. That said, through a lot of hard work and collaboration, Providence Public Schools continues to move forward. The independent reports released last week by reputable nationally recognized organizations show that Providence, despite these unprecedented challenges, made progress. Providence was resilient and mitigated learning loss, and is accelerating learning faster than comparison districts. PPSD is in the process of investing $1 billion to ensure 100% of our students learn in new and like-new buildings. PPSD offers more high-quality CTE programs and 5-star pre-K solutions than ever before. PPSD has expanded access to high-quality curriculum and more professional learning and supports for educators. And PPSD has invested heavily into better serving multilingual learners and other historically underserved student populations, including offering pathways to ESOL certification for teachers. Colleagues, this was all done under the immense challenges of the pandemic, and that should be acknowledged. As we reflect on the successes, we must also keep in mind that the reports show PPSD remains in a vulnerable place, and that the progress can be easily reversed if we do not ensure the proper systems and structures are in place for long-term success. And when I say we, I mean all of us collectively, because the commissioner has been clear that RIDE does not intend on keeping the district forever. We share the common goal of one day returning the district to local control, but we do not want it to backslide. For more than 30 years, several efforts to make the needed changes and improve student outcomes have started and stopped, yielding no results. Like you, I was frustrated by this, and for all the reasons we know, and because my family, who has lived in Providence for about 50 years, has been the recipient of this neglect throughout. At this critical point, we cannot afford to be complacent and return to the ways of the past. PPSD cannot endure another 10 decades of dysfunction. Providence students, families, and teachers deserve better. As we go through the presentation, I want you to consider that we have an opportunity to finally deliver the change students and families have long asked for. That is our priority, that is my priority, and I know for certain that that is also your priority, as I have spent time with many of you, and you have conveyed this sentiment to me actually in this very room not long ago, as I recall. So with that, I'm grateful again for the opportunity. I'm grateful for your commitment, grateful for your engagement, and above all, grateful for what you are doing on behalf of the children and families of the Providence Public Schools. And with that, I'll hand it over to
Mr. President, really quick, just a comment, please. I want to get, can we please get to the presentation? I respect you, Mr. Rodon, and all the work you guys do. But Michael Nina is going to end up having to leave. Can we please, this 40 slides, get directly into the presentation, please?
I appreciate that, and as I was about to say, and my colleague Brian Darrow will now enter the presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Rodon. If your notes taken, I had a conversation with Mr. Darrow prior to in preparation for this, and I highlighted that for Mr. Darrow as well, so he's aware. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rodon. So in the presentation, and recognizing that we'll need to be brief, we'll go through three key sections. First, just want to provide some context to review the relevant statutes and regulations that provide the backbone of the review process and the recommendation process. We'll review the key findings from the independent reports, and lastly, we'll receive consultation from the Providence School Board. I'll go through the first section brief in the interest of time, but at any moment in time, please feel free to say, Brian, ask a question, slow down, or off the Brian. So just recapping the regulatory context, state law passed in 2022 required the Council on Elementary and Secondary Education to create statewide regulations that provide an overview of the review and recommendation process. Part of that statute also applies specifically to Providence. It's based off comparable legislation in Massachusetts. So we went about developing state-level regulations, leveraging similar existing regulations and frameworks from Massachusetts. We engaged local and national experts in school governance to develop these regulations, and we conducted a robust statewide public comment process on the regulations. And just in terms of the actual overall timeline for these regulations, really the process was developed from September through April of 2024. The state level, that's when they were officially approved by the Secretary of State. And then lastly, once they were promulgated, we launched the actual review process at the end of May and beginning of June. Thank you all for participating in that process. Now that we released the reports last week on the 16th, the next steps in the process are first, after releasing the reports, come to you, the school board, as required by law and regulation, to seek your consultation. And from there, we will use your consultation and the information from the reports the commissioner will finalize for recommendation and bring it to the council, tentatively planned for next week, August 29th. Within the regulations themselves, they outline two key considerations of how they are framed, and again, from the experts. The first key question that's evaluated is, one, has the LEA made progress throughout the action plan? And the second key question that's asked is there capacity and readiness at all local levels, at the district level, at the school board level, and at the municipal level to sustain that progress if and when the district returns back to local control? In terms of the recommendation options outlined in the regulations and state law, there's essentially three options with a little bit of nuance within them. The first two options are either to essentially extend the intervention, both renewing the existing turnaround plan or creating a new turnaround plan that can be subject to amendments, updates, and that can be up to a 3-year period before a similar renewal review process would happen. Another option is to formally exit turnaround status and return the district to local control. That can happen immediately, and that can also happen subject to a transitional period. The transitional period can include a variety of different conditions and factors. It could be up to 2 years before there would be a similar review process And after that review process, the transition period could be extended, it could be ended, or the district could be returned back to local control. Again, regulations framed similarly off of Massachusetts. I know I went through that briefly, but any questions in terms of the actual regulations of your statute before moving into the practice?
Any questions regarding the timeline of the regulations?
Just really quick, so
Mr. Stevens?
on slide 2 and slide 3, it says that, with 2, can we go to 2? It says receive consultation from the school, but what does that what does that mean, if you can explain?
So the law and our regulations require that we seek consultation from the school board. It's different than other statutes that say consent or approval. It's with consultation, we are presenting the findings and generally looking for your feedback and response on those findings. So we can use that feedback to then inform the commissioner's recommendation. Getting into the reports themselves, Wyatt engaged 2 entities to conduct independent reviews, both SchoolWorks, again, thank you for participating in that review process, and the Center for Education Policy Research at Harvard University, which I'll just refer to as CEPR going forward. I'm going to talk about the CEPR report first, and then I'll talk about the SchoolWorks report. CEPR, just for context, is essentially the education research arm of the Harvard Graduate School for Education. It's led by Professor Tom Kane, who's faculty director, who also led a report. He is essentially one of the national experts in evaluating pandemic impact, pandemic loss, and pandemic learning recovery. And as we engaged Harvard, there were 3 key questions that we set out to ask. 1, what was Providence's pandemic learning loss from 2019 to 2022? 2, what was the learning recovery from 22 to 23? And then lastly, what's the overall rate of change? And then how is all of that compared to comparable districts in Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and Connecticut? And the desire to do this additional analysis was born from what we heard from experts and feedback we received during the public comment process. We know the TAP goals, when they were originally set prior to the pandemic, were aspirational, and then a pandemic happened. And so this also provides a more apples-to-apples comparison of, during this time frame, how did Providence perform to comparable districts? Quick.
I'm sorry, Mr. Governor, may I ask a question?
What's
So,
up?
I don't see anything here in CEPR about progress against the actual TAP goals itself. So is that accurate that CEPR is really just analyzing performance from during the pandemic to the post-pandemic period in itself, and not actually comparing that to the goals of the TAP?
Thank you for asking the question about academic performance comparisons. SchoolWorks looks at the TAP metrics. So when we get to later in SchoolWorks, they literally, standard 1 has all of the TAP metrics, how do we perform against those metrics.
Okay.
CEPR is a much more in-depth quantitative study that looks at, and I'll get to the data sources in a second, but they look at Providence's relative performance compared to similar districts.
Okay. Not undertake of the similar districts and similar municipalities.
So in terms of the data sources used, they use RICAS MCAS data to cover Massachusetts. They also brought in a variation of NAEP data to bring in Connecticut comparisons, as mentioned, the timeframes. And just to move along, here's the comparison districts they identified. They identified this through a statistical method where they use similar, they created an index based on similar student demographics, tried to match districts that match that index. And this is the list of districts they identified in Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and Connecticut. In terms of key findings from each of these 3 questions, first, for reading, CEPR identified that Providence experienced less learning loss in reading achievement than the Rhode Island and Massachusetts and Connecticut comparison districts. And for math, Providence experienced less loss than Massachusetts and Connecticut, and about the same as Rhode Island. In terms of pandemic learning recovery, again for reading, found that Providence had a favorable comparison in greater pandemic recovery than all the comparable districts in Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and Connecticut. In math, Providence had a greater recovery than the Rhode Island and Massachusetts comparison districts, similar gains to Connecticut. In terms of the overall change of performance during the pandemic, they found that while everybody in all the comparable districts still have declines and are behind where they were before in the pandemic. That's a universal trend. Providence has the smallest rate of change in terms of math and reading achievements than for both subjects than all the comparable districts in the states. Lastly, they looked at a couple additional student subgroup findings. So for Black, Hispanic, disabled, and low-income students, they found very similar trends that I just identified at the overall district level. For multilingual learners, they identified that Providence, math and reading, had a less learning loss than Massachusetts, but naming more than Rhode Island comparison districts. When you look at post-pandemic recovery from 22 to 23, when a lot of the efforts also for the district in the Department of Justice have been in place, they've seen that Providence for multilingual learners have greater recovery in math and reading than both the Rhode Island and Massachusetts comparison districts. This is
So I'm not asking this question in a confrontational way. So I just when I see words like less and greater, they're very general. You know, we're not. It's not clear from the data in this deck or the presentation if it's minusculely greater or substantially greater or shockingly greater or less. So how do we know? How do we make sense of that without seeing the actual data?
it's a good question. Again, trying to be brief in this presentation.
I would just say with respect to my colleague, Mr. Nina, and your back, like, this is a really important presentation in the history of PPSD, and I don't think it calls for a rush through the data. Like I just, and I don't mean that confrontation either, but like I know we want to get to a vote here, but like there's a lot of important material.
Your point is well taken, Mr. Matuk. This is dense information. Mr. Darrow, I hope you don't feel rushed. I just know that sometimes, you tend to dally in some information that may not be as relevant as other pieces of information in the presentation. But I think you're moving at a good pace. And Mr. Matuk, feel free to pause, or anybody else, feel free to pause whenever you have a question.
Again, I'm trying to do my best to be responsive to the wishes of the board.
I appreciate it.
Tell me, slow down, speed up. I heard a little bit of speed up in the beginning. I'm happy to go more in depth.
That's the reason why I wanted to take the vote first.
I have a quick.
Yes, if
Oh, wait,
there's
hold on,
questions.
with respect to my colleague, so yeah, like, are we gonna see the data that underlies these conclusions of
So the
improvement?
data is in the actual CEPR report. That report was released last week. It also was posted and provided with the agenda material this week. In that report, it includes their full statistical analysis. These are the finding statements almost exactly from their executive summary. When you go into the findings, they look at skill scores in terms of student achievement. They convert that to standard deviations, and then have a comparison based on standard deviations.
I got you. I see.
So
CEPR
to answer,
is the
you
H-
have that, you have copies of the reports with the underlying detailed information.
Thank you for that. I see that now. It's the second attachment report deck for this meeting. So thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to add this. Do you mind also like sharing with the board what was the reading level in 2019 compared to 2024?
Absolutely. So can we look at a couple of fast? So for Providence and math in 2018-19, the performance level on RICAS was at 11.9%. In 22-23, it's now at 13%. For Providence and ELA, it's 17.2%. And in 22-23, it was at 15.1%. The one thing I would name, just as Harvard did their own research, and again with a very statistical standard deviation-based model, we did do a comparison on our end looking at how Providence performance in terms of RICAS scores compared to what we thought were similar districts in Rhode Island and also in Massachusetts. And we are seeing similar trends when you just look at the RICAS and contrast that. For example, there are some school districts that before the pandemic and before the intervention, Providence was performing lower than. Providence is now performing higher than those districts. Newport comes to mind. Providence is performing higher than Newport now, and both math and reading, Providence is performing higher than Woonsocket, West Warwick in some subjects, and there's a lot of variation that goes in. And naming, a pandemic happened and everybody felt the impact of that differently. So some districts, again, declined more than Providence. But what we are seeing when we have that comparison, and it is similar to what we saw with the Harvard study, Providence overall has done a better job at having smaller declines and quicker learning coverage across the board.
Yeah, and what I want to know is that the specific number regarding ratings, 2019, 2024.
Absolutely. Again, this is just supplemental. I can't predict this one. For Providence, for math for RICAS in 2018-19, it was at 11.9%, and now it is at 13.0%, which is a 1.1 percentage point increase. And when you look at some similar districts like Warwick, Central Falls, Pawtucket, Newport, Woonsocket, West Warwick, for example, Providence is the only district that is actually now performing higher than it was at the pre-pandemic year. When you look at RICAS ELA, Providence in 2018-19 was at 17.2 percentage points. It is at 15.1 percentage points in school year 22-23. That's a decline of 2.1 percentage points. Again, when you look at the comparable districts, Warwick, Central Falls, Pawtucket, Newport, and West Warwick, just districts who did our own analysis with the urban ring, everyone actually had a larger percentage point decrease than that 2.1 percentage points. So that was just for us.
Chairman, ask a question, and I believe Mr. Stevens will after that. But
Which grade? Which grade? Is it all together you're comparing it to, or can you
So
specify?
this right here is grades 3 through 8. So
Grade
the
3 through 8.
overall district percentage proficiency.
It normally goes by grade, not overall, so I was specific grades.
any further questions on this topic? Thank you, Mr. Dowd. Continue.
On this chart, I just put an overall summary together. You can see each of those comparisons I just walked through, how Providence performs similar to comparable districts. A green check mark indicates that for these measures, Providence performed more favorably in that comparison. The tilde is comparable comparison. You would have seen a red check mark if it was a lesser comparison.
Mr. Matuk?
Okay, I'm sorry, I just want to clarify this, that I see that the conclusion states that, for example, the post-pandemic learning recovery was greater than in other districts. But when you look at the data, the starting point is substantially below the other districts that you're comparing us to.
So the
Right,
way
so while our district might have recovered better from the bottom of the pandemic learning loss levels than other districts, we're still well below. From what I can see in the CEPR report, comparable districts in Massachusetts and Rhode Island Secretary.
So the way that CEPR accommodated for that, they converted those overall scale scores into standard deviation, so they could have a more accurate apples-to-apples comparison in terms of rate of change. And then their comparisons weren't based on the overall percentage point decrease, it was based on the standard deviation. So you can have an apples-to-apples comparison on the overall rate of change from the standard deviation perspective, which allowed them to make their conclusion statements. So for example, and I can find a specific data point if you want me to, the Providence standard deviation rate of change was higher than the comparison indexes from Massachusetts.
It's also the difference between naming absolute proficiency, which we're discussing, versus growth, which is what the comparison started. It's also important to note that whereas Massachusetts and Rhode Island utilize the same test, Connecticut does not. So we're talking about an analysis of somewhat a synthetic analysis to be able to construct this in a manner in which you can compare and create a comparison of apples to apples to show a rate of loss or a rate of gain.
I'm sorry, I appreciate that, but just to make sure I'm understanding it, so the rate of change is the rate of growth. between the two different or the multiple districts that were shown on that slide, it doesn't mean that Providence is doing better than those districts. It means
Right.
that their rate of growth was better.
Subject to where they started.
So the overall rate of change as measured in the secret report by standard deviation.
So Mr. President, Stephen, can you correct me if I'm wrong? So normally, when we're looking and comparing the numbers, it's normally, grade 3, this is their scale compared to, district grade 3, or grade 4, this is sort of their scale of the metric, this is them proficient reading on grade level. Isn't it normally, by grade that we break these numbers down with, not overall?
We can do all of those things. So to answer your question, so for the purposes of this study, what we were seeking to understand was did Providence improve, as in when you compare it to similar districts in Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island. And so it's just a different unit of analysis. But yes, you're absolutely right. All of these can be broken down by grade level for the subject test grades that we have, which are 3 to 8.
You good? And continue, Mr. Darrow?
And then just in transparency, CEPR did also name, as researchers do, a couple of analytical limitations. So when be transparent, we share those as well. The 2 analytical limitations are: 1, they only had 2 years of reliable post-pandemic data, 22 and 2023. They actually didn't use 21 because they thought that was unreliable. So they recommend using additional data in 2024 and 2025. And also PPSD did have a decline in enrollment from 2019 to 2023, which is similar to what we see with major urban school systems nationally in terms of trends, but that it wasn't a stable student population from a statistical perspective. They'd recommend a longitudinal study to be able to account for those variations in enrollment. For all of those reasons, they've described to us that these reports are descriptive statements. They're not necessarily causal statements about the intervention, but this is simply describing, as Dr. Rodon said, what happened during the pandemic and how did Providence fare in terms of its efforts to mitigate learning loss and accelerate learning recovery, comparable to other districts as best we can possibly say. I'm going to move on to the SchoolWorks report. So, for context, SchoolWorks is a nationally recognized education consulting firm with extensive experience doing district, school, and state level reviews. For example, they do similar reviews in Massachusetts and Colorado, and also familiar working in the Rhode Island context. This is from SchoolWorks' process. This is also their process for context is documented and we publicly posted in what's called a protocol manual that outlines the entire process, that outlines all the standards used. These are 2 visuals from that document that describe what the SchoolWorks calls the SchoolWorks process, and it's consistent for every review they do across the nation. They have an evidence-based process that is based off standards and it's iterative, where they move from collecting evidence from various sources and then funneling down to trends to findings that make its way into the final report. As SchoolWorks indicated to us, in their findings, every finding statement they have can be corroborated by at least 3 pieces of evidence. And they were very clear with us that they do not treat any one piece of evidence as superior to other pieces of evidence. No one individual's word is gospel. Every piece of evidence is treated. As we designed the review process, again, we wanted to have it be aligned to best standards. Part of those best standards is having standards to base your review off of. So we built the review process in partnership with Dr. Kenneth Wong from Brown University. He helped develop our overall standards framework, which I'll talk about in a second, as well as the review process. The review process included really 3 key components. First, stakeholder interviews. Those were conducted at the district and at the central office level and at the school level. Thank you all for your participation in those interviews. A total of about 350 folks were invited, approximately 280 participated, which included approximately 85 educators, 40 students, and 40 family and community members, as well as officials from the district, the school board, the city, and state. For school visits, 6 school visits were conducted. All 6 schools were former schools that were reviewed in the 2019 Johns Hopkins review. 2 at each grade level. This again includes stakeholder interviews at the school level and also 30 complete random classroom observations. SchoolWorks was provided. Here's the schedule, here's the layout of the building, go for it. And they pop into classrooms as they saw. And lastly, there was an evidence collection process where there was various pieces of evidence that were provided both by the district, state, school board, the city, and was collected by SchoolWorks. And they reviewed those pieces of evidence, and then in terms of top metrics naming, they focused in on the 2022-2023 metrics because they wanted to evaluate their findings with a holistic, complete year of. In terms of the standards and the way the standards were built in partnership with Dr. Wong, again, going back to these two big questions, first of progress, and if sufficient progress has been made to align to the TAP metrics itself. That is based in standard 1. And then standards 2 through 4 developed with Dr. Wong are really the standards about capacity. Standard 2 focuses on the district capacity, standard 3 on the school board capacity, and standard 4 on the municipal capacity. For the district's capacity, we aligned it and reviewed both the RIDE's own basic education program, which is sort of the backbone of our education system. It identifies 7 core essential functions of an LA, so you'll see that's how we organize our standards. We also reviewed Massachusetts District Review Protocol. There are many indicators and standards in that document. We brought those forward into our standards, really both in standard 2, also in standard 3 for the school board as well. So I'm now going to get into the actual findings for each standard. First, we're going to go through standard 1, which is the metrics. And all this information I'm going to walk through again is just findings directly as stated in the SchoolWorks report. For the top pillar, first they found for engaged communities that 75% of metrics were either met or on track. In being clear, a goal was met if the 22-23 result is already exceeding the top metric. It is met if the 22-23 result, it's on track if the 22-23 results align to the 22-23 targets. So that is the 75% of top metrics were met for engaged communities. A couple of areas that were called out and highlighted in the SchoolWorks review is really an increased sense of interaction and belonging from students and families at the school level. And an area of future phases of improvement is while there's been an increase in perception from families at the school level, there is still work at the district level that favorable perception has increased. One thing I forgot to mention, but it is important for how this report is framed. When we developed the process, we engaged, and this was feedback from our council, superintendents have gone through this process in Massachusetts. And what they framed to us is similar reviews felt like a compliance exercise and not a support exercise. And so we tried to frame the report and its findings from SchoolWorks to call out and recognize progress and strengths, and also call out and recognize areas for future phases of improvements. So that way, anybody can pick up this document, the district, anyone can pick it up, and have a roadmap of how the district can be improved and areas that can be worked on. For standard 2, for excellence in learning, we found that 32% of metrics were fully met or on track of school year 22-23. It highlighted that the district has implemented a variety of activities that have begun to focus on improving standardized assessment results. There's also recognized an increase in the number of multilingual learners in advanced academic courses. The SchoolWorks report did recognize and name that while the district has focused on implementing intervention efforts, they haven't translated to the district actually meeting the TAP metrics as outlined yet. I think one thing that is important, naming, especially as it pertains to the excellence in learning section, when the district set the TAP metrics back in 2019 or in 2020, the TAP metrics were set before the pandemic. And they were set as aspirational North Star standards. I think feedback that we received in the public comment process was that potentially these TAP metrics actually are not realistic, and so there's questions about whether or not they should be evaluated. For example, if the district were to meet its 3rd grade ELA target goal right now, which is 68% in the TAP metrics, that would be beating their goal. So that is just one of the reasons, and just some additional context to name as we go through this. And again, one of the reasons, as we receive public comments, why we also engaged Harvard So that way we can look at the TAP metrics as originally stated with fidelity to the process, and also provide some important context and apples to apples comparisons. When looking at world-class talent, it found that 60% of the metrics were either fully met or on track to be met as of school year 22 and 23. Areas that were highlighted were an increase in the percentage of teachers holding the TESOL and BDL certification, as well as an increase in job-embedded professional development, both areas called out in the Johnson report. They also found that similarly, despite some of these efforts, the district is below the current TAP goals for a variety of categories, such as fully staffed classrooms at the beginning of the year, qualified external applicants, and a number of teachers of color. In most of those metrics, the district has made progress since the intervention. However, it is naming below the TAP target that was set for school year 22 and school year 23. For efficient district systems, they found that 60% of the metrics were either met or on track. They highlighted increase in funding for school-based decision-making, as well as an increase to district resources for school leaders. Later in the report, the district called out that's really aligned to the implementation of student-based budgeting. They've also streamlined the process for working with contractors, as called out in the Johns Hopkins report. At the same time, an area of growth for the district, they named that the number of school leaders who have a favorable perception of the district has decreased.
I'm sorry. Mr. Farrow, when you say the number of school leaders, what does that mean?
It's there is a survey works question in our annual survey works assessment that asks school leaders if you have a favorable perception of the school district central office.
And what do we define school leaders as? Principals?
So principals.
Principals. That's
Principals and I think vice principals as well. Yes, administrators at the school. Any additional questions before moving on to standard 2?
You other questions on standard 1?
So standard 2, again, we built these off the 7 essential functions of an LEA. As I go through these, just going to read the direct finding statement as written by SchoolWorks.
I have a question.
Of course.
So you were mentioning earlier that the number of students has decreased since 2018. All of that was taken into consideration when doing these percentages, since we can't see like the exact numbers here, but in the percentages, for example, when you do a survey or ask questions to 1,000 people, it's different than when you ask 100 people. So but the percentages will show that. Was that taken into consideration throughout?
Excellent question. That was taken into account more on the analytical limitations of the CEPR report. When looking for SchoolWorks, they looked at the actual metrics as reported. So for example, for survey work, so they looked at percentage of any particular survey response. That being said, I do think to the question about responding survey, the percentage of families that are actually completing a survey response has actually increased. So then that is one of the metrics that's So for standard 1, which is about leading a focus on leading and achievement, they find that SchoolWorks finds the district provides some on-site direction that guides site-based decision leadership. They also find that the district is not yet consistently identified expectations and accountability for the implementation of some proven instructional practices, and has only addressed some of the barriers for those practices and identified educational goals. For standard 2.2, SchoolWorks finds that the district has developed some new systems to support the recruitment, identification, mentorship, support, and retention of effective staff. They also find that the district does not yet have built the capacity of staff to meet organizational expectations, and they are at the beginning stages of providing job-embedded PD based on student need. For standard 2.3, which focuses on high-quality curriculum and materials, SchoolWorks finds that the district has selected curriculum based on data and is beginning to focus on data-driven instructional strategies. They also find that the district is beginning to focus on job-embedded PD, course responsive practices, and the implementation of formative and summative assessments. For using information for planning and accountability, they find that the district is beginning to develop and implement proficiency-based comprehensive assessment systems, and that the district is beginning to distribute the results of measured student progress and student performance, and beginning to develop responsive information systems. For standard 2.5, which is about engaging families and community, they find that the district is beginning to implement effective family and community communication systems. The district is not yet, however, engaging families and community members to provide and promote positive student achievement and behavior. And the district is beginning to provide some results and alternative learning opportunities that are somewhat integrated with community needs. On standard 2.6, which is safe, supportive environments for students and staff. So this speaks to both facilities as well as efforts to improve school climate and culture. They find that the district does have a plan that is beginning to address the physical, social, and emotional needs of all students. However, they find that the plan has not yet resulted and translated into changed perceptions of entirely safe facilities and learning environments for all students and staff based on the 22-23 survey works response. And they also find that the students have at least one adult accountable for their learning. Lastly, for standard 2.7, equity and adequacy of fiscal and HR resources, they do find, SchoolWorks finds that the district identifies resources to meet student needs, but does not yet provide the requisite resources to fully meet those needs, and that the district is beginning to allocate fiscal and human resources based on student need by implementing systems to overcome barriers to effective resource allocation at the school level. Any questions on standard 2.7 before moving on to standard 3? Any questions on this?
I have a question. To me, I feel like the most commonly used word in this section of LEA capacity is beginning. And so I think I just would ask for your opinion, Mr. Darrow, Dr. Radon. Like, to me, that's saying that this section of the Survey Works report would indicate that that the transition to local control. Well, let's put it this way: like at the beginning of the TAP, you would not have wanted to see the word "beginning" so frequently in capacity at the time when a transition to local control would be initiated. Is that an accurate statement?
I think this is where we have to take into context the totality of what has been done and when we began. So typically speaking, when you enter into an intervention of this type, like anything else, it takes 3 to 5 years to gain hold of what you're trying to achieve, right? So the first year you organize, second year you begin to set strategies for implementation, third year you're solidly implementing what you began in the first year, and then the fourth year you're taking a hold, and then the fifth year you're evaluating, and you should have advanced quite considerably. That is usually the arc of how planning works. All of this was done in the middle of the pandemic.
Sure.
And the pandemic has yet to fully leave us, really, because we're still managing the outcomes of those students and supporting those students. However, when we look at, depending on the variety of issues, not everything is being done all at the same time. So you are looking at things that perhaps were initiated in just the last year in terms of implementation and now are showing up. You might be looking at things that might be a little bit more too mature in their implementation, but are a little more complex in terms of implementation, such as curriculum. And there's further work to be done in there. So it really depends on which of the items, but you have to look at the totality of it.
Thank you.
In terms of the requisite resources that this first outline there not being fully met, what type of requisite resources are not being provided? Could you elaborate, please?
Absolutely. So one of the things I believe that speaks to is also financial resources. And so as there was discussion about the district capacity, it does come out. One of the concerns about the district is actually some of the limited resources that the district has, both in terms of things that I believe have been engaged with school board before, declining enrollment student population, which results in increased funding. There is decreasing and decline of federal stimulus funding. There's ongoing litigation with the city. So all of that creates fiscal constraints for the district to fully provide the adequate resources that it believes that it fully needs.
I mean, and I think when you look at particular student populations, like for example, I think you are all well aware that our pre-K special education student population depending on when they come in and how they come into the district, come with a variety of needs. That student population could be anywhere between the basic baseline that is provided to, depending on the child's need, could be approximately $50,000 to $100,000. So it really does depend. Dollars that the district does not fully have, because why? Special education is not funded on a direct cost basis. So that is reflected here.
Ms. Newman?
Is there actually a price tag on what the state takeover cost? Like, how much does it cost Rhode Island? And is the city responsible for any of that money? I don't know how that works, but what is the overall cost impact of having a state takeover?
I would not equate it to an overall cost impact of a state intervention. It really is the core budget of the district, which is comprised of state, local, federal funding. And then in the context that we're in right now, we also had federal stimulus dollars, which, as you know, are being phased out as of this year.
So the state, to manage a takeover of this magnitude, I would assume that there would need to be staffing on the state level outside of the commissioner that would need to be employed to manage this. So there's not a budget for the takeover that is separate from the district's budget.
Well, I can tell you that as the person who supervises the work, I don't have a team of folks that are added to the state in order to manage this. We really are working within the limitations of the staff that we have, and staff essentially has added responsibilities to support the overall needs of the district.
And so, like, thank you for that. And so even like the cost of like the surveys, which I know are mandated as part of the takeover process, they cost some money. That's not part of a specific budget for a takeover.
So the survey work reports or the survey is managed by the agency, and we do pay for that from our dollars. But it's not specialized funding specific to that. In other words, it's part of our core activities that are carried out. So
Our
we
is
don't
ride is like
correct. We don't have a line item in our budget that says these are additional dollars for managing the intervention.
And Dr. O'Donnell, if I could just help add even further, SurveyWorks, we administered annually for a regional school district across the state. So we'd be administering for Providence, irrespective of Providence.
I meant SchoolWorks in the Harvard report.
So the SchoolWorks contract did come at a cost, and that did come out of state dollars. Harvard actually did not and engage in a cost basis for this. They actually conducted this report and analysis for free.
That's really nice. Really, I guess I'm asking the question because for a project of this magnitude, it is surprising to me that there's not a budget for what are we in, five year almost state takeover. And a budget is, I think, really important to ask about, and then I'd like to follow up if that's possible, if there is anything related to that, especially as we're talking about resourcing for the district. There is a cost, and I don't know if we know what that is, and I think it's important for us to understand how much of the state's resources that maybe could be going to resource the district so they could carry out this work. I think it's important for us to know that information.
Again, it is the state's core allocation for the district, as well as my engagement and the engagement of a whole slew of variety of staff from the agency who are doing this in addition to the regular duties.
Yeah, and I kind of, for example, correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. O'Donnell, the majority of districts who are on school improvement status are Providence districts. Providence is our largest district. At RIDE as an agency, we've tried to shift from an agency that focuses just on compliance to one that focuses on support. So irrespective of the intervention, the district, the agency would be focused on trying to support Providence. I do think if your question is, have it in our own budget, have additional fiscal resources come to the state agency to help support this takeover, I think the answer to that is no. And I think if I would say, like, as an agency, we are in agreement with you that we would like more resources to actually help support this, and I've requested that, but we're operating within the constraints we have to be as supportive
And what we've done to that is we have adjusted some of our internal operations. Like for example, what Brian was alluding to is that our CSI team, which is our school improvement team, we have a number of schools in the district, I believe it's about 11, as opposed to our traditional process for how we engage in the school improvement process for those schools. We are embedded with the team here, working hand to hand in terms of ensuring that there is alignment with the planning efforts, and that we are working. Our staff is working to align to what is being done on the ground as well.
Mr. Nino?
Yeah, I was looking at different slides. I was also concerned about what Mr. Matuk said about a lot of the slides say, oh, this is the beginning part, or we don't have the expectations. It's almost basically saying that that it's leading into, the state should still continue to take over because they're not seeing results yet. And it's been like, I think like Angel said, it's been like almost 5 years. I've been in the board now for almost a year. I still haven't seen the commissioner in any of our meetings to ask any questions. And there's a lot of questions regarding this, like, for example, a budget. Like, what does the state takeover really mean for our schools and for our parents and our communities? Is there any extra funding coming in regarding specifically to help with this specific area? Or like you're saying, you don't have any extra team members. Nothing extra was given to you to support a state taking over a city's job to do something in the community. So for me, I'm really worried about like the language that's being used, because basically saying we need more, like many more years in order to see results.
So okay. So first of all, that's not what we're saying. What we're saying is we are presenting to you the information of the findings of these reports, and the findings are being shown on a range, right? There is progress that has been made, and the report also highlights areas that are still in need of additional improvement.
The other question I had is, in this process, I know that they've done like service with families and stuff like that. How has been the engagement? Because, for example, a lot of the decisions that are going to be made, or everything in regarding to all this data, like the curriculums or the materials for the students, how are the parents getting involved in this since the state takeover?
So I think that would be a more appropriate question for district staff who are on the ground doing that work. But I can tell you that from our perspective, we have an expectation that families are aware of the curriculum being realized and implemented in schools, and there's enough work I understand is being done.
Mr. President, Mr. Stevens. Superintendent, would you be able to answer his question, how families are engaged?
There are different ways that we engage with the community. We have two DWAC and PAC, two parent leadership teams that we work to, where we share information. We're also trying to go to some of the district, some of the open forums. My community engagement office, they are also trying to reach out to parents. So there's many ways that we can continue, because it's an area that we've got to continue to improve. And what this tells me when I look at this data that we have in front of me is, okay, where we're improving, but also where are the areas that we need to continue to focus on. And that's just another method that we have that we're going to continue to improve. So like I stated before, I know that we're making gains, but we know that we're not where we want to be, and we're going to continue. And this is just another way that we can continue to use this data to move forward. And whatever we have to do to continue engaging parents, we will take those steps.
Mr. Nino?
What makes this different from back in 2018, 2019 to now? Like, for example, every year, everybody's saying, oh, we could be doing better. Or every year we hear, the teachers and the principals and everybody saying, oh, we're doing better here. We're not where we want to be yet. What makes this different? Or is this just it just sounds like there's no difference between what the schools used to do before to what's going on now in the data. The schools were doing surveys before this and getting a lot of this information before the state takeover, right? So what's different with this information being, what's the major difference? I mean, all of these surveys, the data was collected before.
The surveys are but one measure across time. Again, the purpose of these reports is to share the totality across the measuring against standards and measuring the overall progress of the district. So the surveys are just but one point of data.
Okay, so those metrics and data were they not being done before this?
So I think your question was the data being collected beforehand. Yes, the district was being collected. I think part of its own action plan, as with any strategic improvement effort, is to identify metrics and drive strategies towards the increasing growth of those metrics. So to your question, for example, around engaged communities, the top metrics actually did find that 75% of those metrics were fully met or on track, meaning there is progress on those engaged community metrics from before the intervention to where they're now, and that growth is actually at the level of the targets.
But even in one of the metrics, it was said like, yeah, there was growth, but families felt that they were not engaged as much in another question.
Right. So, for example, that there is an increase in perception of engagement at the school level. That is one metric where there's definitely seen increased growth. There's another increased growth from 40 to 57% of students who feel a sense of belonging at their school. That was one of the key findings that came out of the Johns Hopkins report. And so the metric that you're referring to is not about the school level, but it's about the district level. So it's just a different question.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out because with the data, I haven't seen the full data list or anything like that. I'm just trying to figure out what major difference has been there after the school takeover in regards to the data being collected. And I mean, I've been in the Providence schools. I graduated from Providence schools, went to elementary school, middle school, high school, and every year I hear the same type of information and data. So for me, it's almost like the state takeover, there hasn't been any major difference. There hasn't been any major financial input from, the question like, what was the budget? Any extra support? So I'm trying to figure out what has been the real impact of the state taking over. It's been almost 5 years. So I'm trying to figure out, is there any more funding? We're losing funding, but that was COVID. So I'm trying to figure out what exactly came from the state takeover directly.
There's clarifying one question on funding. While there wasn't a direct increase to RIDE's direct budget, at least from the state funding formula perspective, and again, state engagement with the district is the funding, I believe, from fiscal year 19 to fiscal year 25 budget has increased by about 18%, which is a significant increase.
Thank you, Mr. Nino.
And there's also increases in terms of school facilities, for example. So just a very clear, tangible example, the Johns Hopkins report called out the state of facilities. This report calls out a universal recognition from all stakeholders that there is significant work that is happening in facilities. We are in the middle of phases 1 through phase 3. We're embarking on phase 4, which hopefully will result in 100% of students being in newer like new buildings. That is a significant fiscal investment. 91% of that comes from the state, and part of that came from the original conversations at the beginning of the intervention to revitalize a plan that was from originally doing Band-Aids to one that is actually deep student-centered investment. So when you look at state investment and how that is directly changed during the intervention, I think by any of the new members, any of the board members, to also go visit the new schools that were opening. These new schools being opened is, I think, direct result of RIDE working collaboratively with the district, working collaboratively with the city to put a brand new facilities plan in action. So I'm just calling that out as a direct Johns Hopkins funding to an area where you can see physical, tangible investment.
Any questions, Mr. Stevens?
Yeah, so I'm happy, that I'm an alumni of the district. And I've always been involved as it pertains to what took place in the schools. What I know to be true, even because I was active while I was a student in school, was that, the facilities, and you guys are doing an amazing job, but I knew the facilities, the former treasurer who's a congressman now, Steph Magazina, he sort of put in sort of a bond that was going to improve the schools, whether it was a takeover or not. So we was always going to see significant improvement as it pertained to our schools. Now I do have to give credit to the operations team, because whenever there's something going on with the schools, Sal or even Zach, they will be on it. So I do want to definitely acknowledge that. My question is, do you guys think that there has been, or do you guys think that there was in fact a need for the takeover? What am I talking about? As it pertains to data, we're not really seeing any difference. We actually are seeing in a lot of these TAP pillars that we have improved better under local control than state control, and we went down as it pertains to progress in a lot of the TAP pillars. So my question is, do you think that this was actually useful, helpful, or do you think that there was in fact a need for it to begin with now that we're looking at the data?
So, from my perspective, based on the community demand at the time, remember the TAP was created by the community. It's not something that we came up with. There was a community design team that demanded change. The community demanded change. They met over time. They came up with this process. They articulated the demands. They articulated the progress measures. And so the TAP in itself is a response to a community demand. So if you're asking me, was the community right at the point in time? Absolutely right. Now, we have seen significant progress. We have seen better processes, systems, and structures in the district. When I joined the team in 2020, our HR office was essentially running a post-its of spreadsheets, and it was hard to track down information. Now there is actually a pretty well-structured system in place where we actually know who is doing what, where they are assigned to, how they are faring. We have teachers who are earning their certifications, and the district is actually paying for those, which was not the case prior to the intervention. As it pertains to high quality curriculum and a unified curriculum across the district that is being utilized, and teachers are receiving data in the moment in the classroom, those are things that were not happening prior to the intervention. As it relates to having facilities that are in better standard, better shape, better cleanliness, being implemented in a consistent fashion. To your point about the operations team, they are doing a terrific job. I'm not here to litigate what was done prior to that. What I am sharing with you, and we are sharing with you based on the reports that we have in front of us, is that we are seeing progress. We are seeing positive progress, and we are building a foundation ready for the next set of work that needs to be done on behalf of the children and families of Providence.
Ms. Newman?
Thank you so much. And the last thing that I will do, or I think any of us want to do, is discredit the work that you all have done, and that there has been progress. I guess my question, and there hasn't been progress or enough progress in other areas as well, right? And I think we all are working in jobs outside of the school board, so I think we understand change management enough to know that this is hard. This is really hard, and we appreciate you all. At the same time, I do want to just elevate, and I guess it's sort of a question. It's I wonder, and you all tell me what you think. Is it the takeover and the state control that has contributed to the growth, or is it this sort of collaboration that you described really beautifully? Between the district, between the city, between the state, between RIDE, having the community organize and set standards and resourcing. It almost sounds like there was some takeover of RIDE in some ways too, of getting those systems in order as well, where it's not just a PPSD issue, but it's across the board, just cohesion of folks realizing through the John Hopkins report that there's a problem that we all need to pay attention to. So I guess my question is, can that continue without a takeover? Because I think we can maybe debate and also agree on what has been gained, and there's for sure been some gains, and there's been some maybe not enough in some of our opinion. But I can tell you what's been lost. I can definitely tell you what's been lost, and I think I've been a board member for almost a year as well too, and I can say that I feel like a punching bag for the community, who I love very much, and I'll get punched in the face all day, if that's what I have to do. But not seeing the commissioner come to one meeting. For us to all sit up here, maybe not every one of us, I can't remember what the vote was, but to speak out passionately and hear the community come out in defense of 360 and not letting AP, Norris go, for us to make a vote on that and say, no, let's stop that. And for the commissioner to veto it, I have felt, and I think I can speak for some of my board members, completely powerless. And all of us have PPSD emails and keys to this building. And if we feel powerless, how do our students and families feel? And I think that collectivity is where we need to be, and it's no shade, but whatever, to the commissioner, in moments like that, that's what makes us feel this way. That I want to see the district come back to a community and to a collective and not be subject to one person's veto power. I think that's what's really important, and I feel like everything you described, which is beautiful, which is that collaboration, that investment, that organizing, that vision, can that continue without having a takeover be looming over all of us?
Well, Ms. Neiman, thank you. I share your sentiment. I think that, and by that I mean that our whole goal, our whole purpose is to get to the point where we can do this without the condition of a state intervention. As the commissioner has stated, the state, the agency has no interest in maintaining the district under state intervention forever. Our goal is to be able to work on the capacity of the district and the local governance structures in order to be able to say, hey folks, we want to continue to do this together, and self-governance is the next step in that. The question is when. But I share your sentiment in terms of, yes, we want to achieve that, and we want to achieve that collective partnership. So thank you for that.
Sorry, Mr. Stevens, you can finish your line of question.
I'm so sorry. And I like your socks, Mr. So I wanted to finish my response really quick. So, I see there's some progress, like we said, in facilities. There's some progress in different areas, and I don't want to dismiss that. But one of the main things I want to make a note of is student achievement. That's the main progress that I want to be able to see as a board member, knowing that, I was a student that was once in middle school and high school, even elementary school, not reading on grade level, needed an IEP to be caught up. So, when we look at the increase of students who are present in school, yes, we're making increase towards that 90%, but pre-takeover, we've seen a massive increase. We've seen an increase as it pertains to students meeting expectations on third grade ELA. It looked better at 26% before the takeover than now at 19%. So one of the main things I want to know is, do you feel as if the takeover, if we are going to be able to meet a lot of these metrics, and not only that, do you think that student achievement is at the helm of this? Because we can make improvements in HR, engaged communities, all of these different areas. But the main point in this is student achievement. And I want to make sure that our students are able to do math and read on grade level.
Agree with you 100%, sir. I think when the intervention first started, I think a metaphor that the commissioner used is turning around the school district that has 30 years of decades of dysfunction is like turning a rotor on a giant ship. It's going to take a while, but it can be done. The metaphor now is all that is true, and that happened in the middle of a hurricane. And that hurricane is the pandemic, and recognizing the impact that the pandemic had, not just on Providence, but on every school system across America. Every school system, for the most part, has decreased results. That's consistent with what CEPR has found, not just in Providence, but in nationwide studies. We also at RIDE had another study done where they found it would take about 3 to 5 years to get back to pre-pandemic levels, which this is consistent with, and Providence is actually a little bit further ahead of. That's one of the reasons why we wanted to engage CEPR to really dig into the data to truly understand what happened during the pandemic. And what they found throughout all of that is that while it may not feel that way, and by no means does anybody have a mission accomplished manner, progress relative to other school systems happened during that time frame. And that is due to going back in time, remembering all the work that you, school board members, did during the pandemic, all the work that teachers did during the pandemic, all the work that students and families did to keep schools open and safe. Providence received national recognition for what being really the only major urban school district in New England to safely return schools during the pandemic. So much work went into that compared to other school systems, and the results are calling out what happened to those other school systems. So again, we are by no means agree with you 100%. No one is where we think we need to be right now, and that is irrespective of what happens. Everyone is collectively committed towards continuing to drive towards that improvement. But when looking at that time frame during the pandemic, I think there is a lot of work that went in, and that work worked, and I do want, hopefully people leave reading the CEPR study, recognizing just some pride in terms of what we were able to collectively do during the pandemic that other school systems were able to do as it pertains to student achievement.
Any questions on this slide? Because we have a few more slides, but Mr. Nina, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time and the explanation, taking the time to, explain everything to us. I do agree in some way that, it's been dysfunctional for many, many years. I mean, but it's still dysfunctional now. It's going to be dysfunctional for a long time. Maybe it will never stop being dysfunctional. It depends on who's seeing it. But I really do appreciate the work that a lot of the previous teachers and leadership in the schools have been doing. I'm the product of Providence schools. It worked. Some of it worked for me. Most of it worked for me. For some others, it didn't. And that's something that, it depends on who's doing that. In regards to the data, like I think it was regarding the excellence in learning. I have a huge concern regarding the same thing about like the students, because a lot of the way that the data has been measured changed. Like for example, like the grade point average, changed during the pandemic for some of the schools. Like for example, the way they would measure like school excellence changed. So for example, like classical high school, they have basically like an entrance exam. Other schools don't. So that kind of information is like that school's already being set up to have some of the best students to be there. No ESL students, no students. And then PCTA has ESL students, but they're not included in some of the major parts of, for example, PCTA in the graduation data. For example, how many of them are graduating from one of those programs that they can get a job right after graduating? Because that was one of the things I asked in previous years. So for me, the data is, there's things missing in the data, or just being like presented in a way that there's aspects that are still like missing and hard to understand.
So, thank you. I appreciate that. I think, what you are looking here is aggregated data and a comparison of apples to apples. What I might suggest, and I would either welcome the district staff or even my staff, is that we would be more than happy to go down to the level of grade level data. I think that is very much possible, so that you can see the individual growth across grade levels that has occurred over the years, because growth and positive growth in student outcomes has occurred over this period of time. Looking at aggregated data might make it a little difficult to fully see it, even though the data indicates the same, but I think we can certainly work with you to that end. Additionally, I think what you will see, and we have experienced, is significant improvements for the conditions of our MLO students. Obviously, it is something that is mandated by the Department of Justice, but in addition to that, and furthermore, I think the team here in Providence has done a remarkable job to ensure that our multilingual learner students do have access to a variety of programs in an equal or greater or equal fashion as our non-MLO students. They are counted, they are seen, they are part of all of our data, and they are measured in apples and apples in that sense as well. So, but again, we're very happy to go in at a grade by grade level with you. If this is, that is
that would be helpful.
Additional clarifications.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah.
So I'd like to proceed with the presentation, because Mr. Lina, I know you have been aching back. So you've been stuck in the slide for a while, but these are great questions. Gentlemen.
Going to move along from standard 2 to standard 3. And again, these standards 2 through 4 about evaluating capacity at all levels to sustain progress if and when the district is returned back to local control. Now, before I get to the findings, just in transparency, the way that we designed this presentation, it was designed to be consistent and just read verbatim what SchoolWorks' findings were. We did not want it to be misconstrued at all. We want to be transparent with the findings and not think that we are presenting something different, that it's right spin on the actual findings. We want to be consistent in how all sections 2 through 4 are shared. That being said, I do want to acknowledge and recognize that in the standards for findings for standard 3, there are some very direct findings. And of those findings, I do also want to acknowledge, in terms of transparency, some nuance that is there in the report can be missed. And so while it's not as consistent, I do want to call out some additional nuance to help contextualize the findings for section 3, which is about school board capacity One, again, not for every single one of these standards are we calling out progress, strengths, areas of growth. Otherwise, it'd be a much longer presentation, and I know that everyone wants to sit through. But these sections do call out progress that this has been demonstrated by the school board. For example, they call out that the school board is a positive venue for family and community engagement. It calls out that the school board does have a consistent review of TAP metrics, especially called out the names for the HR and the operations sections. And it also calls out that there is a functioning committee structure that is well participated by all school board members. And so those are some strengths called out by SchoolWorks. It also called out areas for future improvement for the school board. And before getting into them, I think it's also worth naming, and fidelity to the report, not all of the areas of improvement for the school board are directly related to the school board itself's capacity. It's related to what efforts other entities do, like the school district, like RIDE, like the municipal entity, to build consistent and clear systems and structures that can help the school board build their capacity and further effectuate their responsibilities.
Mr. President,
Mr. Stevens?
really quick before we proceed with the school board, can you explain to me why the school board was evaluated but not RIDE?
So this is a framework that was again developed in consultation with Dr. Wong in alignment with both the statewide statute as well as the regulations. And the regulations again mirrored similarly all same best practices that we saw in Massachusetts as well.
So, and I think Mr. Darrow outlined it originally, the regulations stem from the Zurier legislation, and in the regulations, it's an evaluation of the entirety of the Providence Public School District, including the functions of each aspect or agency of that. So that's part of the governance obligation and analysis that was conducted prior to the consideration of the return to the district to local control. So that's why there was some reference to the school board as well.
So anyone that would have probably made or raised concerns about like the Rhode Island Department of Education, due to law, they would not add that. That would automatically be substituted out and not be added within the SchoolWorks report.
It's not part of the report because it's not part of the overall Providence Public School District organization. So the analysis was specific to PPSD.
Thank you.
And then last, when it gets to findings for the school board and calling out areas of improvement for the school board, it's important, again, all the finding statements that SchoolWorks has for all of their findings, they cite are corroborated by evidence. And just want to be clear, these are SchoolWorks' findings. They are not RIDE's findings. They were independently done. And pieces of evidence that they looked at for the school board were both direct statements from school board members and stakeholder interviews. They reviewed meeting agendas, minutes, documentations, and they actually went back and watched meeting videos themselves of prior meetings. So just wanted to provide all of that context before reading the finding statements consistent with how I did for standard 2 and will do for standard 4. So for standard 3.1, which is about focusing on improving outcomes for students, the overall finding statement from SchoolWorks is that the school board has a limited focus on improving outcomes for students. For standard 3.2, which is about establishing a culture of collaboration, SchoolWorks' overall finding statement is that the school board does not establish a culture of collaboration. And for standard 3.3, which is about fulfilling legal and fiduciary responsibilities, this standard speaks to both the existing responsibilities as an advisory function, but also capacity to resume all the responsibilities of the school board as outlined in state law. The SchoolWorks' overall finding is that the school board does not adequately fulfill legal and fiduciary responsibilities as defined in Rhode Island state law. And so I'll pause.
Ms. Aiken, you got your hand up? Mr. Neiman?
Could you please, in that statement, define what the legal and fiduciary responsibilities are not being adequately met by the school board, please?
So I'll read the specific indicators for the standard. Again, this is in the SchoolWorks protocol. These standards were also provided as part of the review process. So it says first, in accordance with Rhode Island General Law 1629 and as applicable under Rhode Island General Law 167.5-1, establishes priorities, goals, policies, procedures, systems, and budgets to enable LDA-wide improvements, demonstrates the capacity and readiness to resume operations with transparency, maintaining clear and appropriate division of roles between municipal offices, the committee, the superintendent, LEA staff in accordance with site-based management practices, also aligning with site-based management law, passing the Education Accountability Act, demonstrates the capacity and readiness to resume the adoption of appropriate division of roles among members of the school committee to ensure that the committee is a highly functional and strategic policy-making body for the LEA as a whole, demonstrates the capacity and readiness to resume taking responsibility for securing adequate and equitable funding for the LEA, demonstrates the capacity and readiness to resume prudent financial management and spending in accordance with the budget as approved. Demonstrates, and this one actually isn't applicable to Providence, but it's in the standards for reading it. Demonstrates that the school board has the capacity to resume an active and constructive role in developing timely and effective strategies for collective bargaining and managing negotiations, and addresses any additional school committee-based deficiencies identified in the underlying analysis that contribute to an LEA to coming under state control pursuant to Rhode Island General Law 16.7.1.
Thank you. So basically, you're citing the laws and the regulations, but you're not citing actual scenarios, if you will. And the reason why I ask is because I, as the chair of finance, have addressed various concerns in writing about some of these matters. And the feedback I received, was not very, it was not very defining in terms of my request and recommendations for budgetary aspects.
I'd like to chime in here as well. So I don't take issue with the report saying not collaborative or whatever. To me, that's all subjective, I believe, But this is the aspect that I'm confused by. You just enumerated a number of statutes and laws that are no longer applicable to us because they've been stripped from us during the state of intervention. Like literally our role is very limited under RIGL, under Rhode Island General Law. Our role is very prescriptive. One of the things you mentioned is, us being a policy-making body. That's really hard to even do when getting a policy advisor at the district has been a very arduous task. So I think it's worth noting. I think it's worth adding context to this specific piece. This is the specific piece that I take issue with, which is you're enumerating all these things that we would gladly carry out. One, if we actually had the authority to do those things. And two, if you had the staff of if you had the staff support of central office to carry out some of these obligations, and we don't. Mr. Needham?
Yeah, I also wanted to make an observation in regards to just like you said, I know that it depends on your perspective regarding, establishing a culture of collaboration. But like I said earlier, both Angel and I can say, I haven't yet to meet with a commissioner who is basically the person in charge of making a lot of the decisions. I haven't gotten a call. I got a call from every school board member here. Superintendent Javier Montañez met with me literally the very first week that I was introducing to the board. I have yet to meet the commissioner, and it's been almost a year. Haven't seen her in any of the meetings. I was hoping to see her here. Haven't seen her in any of the community events I've been to, and I'm very involved in the community. So for me, the whole culture of collaboration, how can we collaborate with an absent person or an absent leader that's supposed to be here? So for me, that, the only times I ever hear anything from the commissioner is through emails, a letter that she wrote. But for me, that's not conducive to a spirit of collaboration. So I don't see that in the report. I definitely think that we should add some context to a lot of these things.
So just a couple of things, if I may, Mr. President. The commissioner does not oversee the district. That's why we have a superintendent who is working in conjunction with you. I am here as deputy commissioner on behalf of the commissioner, and I have met with some of you in the past as well, and will be willing to do so in the future. Added to that, the commissioner does meet on a pretty regular basis with the leadership of the board and engages on quite constant conversation with them as well. Unfortunately, the commissioner had a previous family engagement and could not be with us this evening. Otherwise, I believe that she actually would have wanted to be here. But having said that, I appreciate your sentiment, your words, and thank you.
Yeah, I just want to say that I totally understand that and I appreciate that, but we've had so many meetings in the school board, special meetings, like the 360 meeting with every single parent that came here left early from their job, took the day off. Parents who left here almost at midnight, You know, we're all very busy people, full-time jobs doing this thing too. I'm literally here sick. I've seen Mr. Javier Montañez here literally limping into the meetings. So for me, like, I get it once, maybe twice, but every single meeting this year, no presence of the commissioner. And I'm glad you're here because, you know, your expertise is valuable, but, you know, at the end of it all, she is a decision maker in here, and collaboration has to happen mutually amongst everybody, you know? So for me, it's very important to have the presence of, you know, the commissioner in these meetings as often as she can, because parents want to meet her. Parents want to be able to ask questions. We want to ask questions instead of having to do everything by emails. For me, I don't even know if she's the one responding, to be honest. I don't know. It's just an email. I haven't met her. So for me, it's important to have that, but I totally understand your viewpoints.
Thank you, Mr. Nino.
I
Mr.
appreciate,
Darrow, then Mr. Stevens.
I appreciate you naming potential barriers, and that's again, recognizing that these overall finding statements do not provide as much nuance, but I tried to provide some context in the beginning. I think to your section about standard 3.2, if I encourage folks who haven't already, do read it for more context is given. And so, for example, there is one statement that I think is relevant to what you said. It said school committee members shared examples of how mistrust amongst their members and across entities named superintendent, RIDE, PPSD, leadership, mayor, and council is a barrier to collaboration. So it calls out, again, trying to reference the evidence that's provided is existing statements from school committee members and speaks to barriers for collaboration amongst all parties. And that's why it's identified as an area of growth for future phases of improvement.
In the report, can we find like what exactly led to that phrase of the school board does not establish a culture of collaboration, like examples of that?
Correct. So if you look, for example, page 34 of the report, you'll see at the top the overall finding statement. The school committee does not establish a culture of collaboration. And there's bullet points for areas of notable progress. There's bullet points for areas of strength that are called out, and there's bullets for areas of future phases of improvement. And so one of the bullet points that I just read out was around areas for future phases of improvement, getting a lot of the nuance about barriers and also areas of growth for all parties can be found in this section.
Thank you, Mr. Nino. I believe it was Mr. Stevens, then Ms. Newman, then Ms. Hughes.
Yeah, I want to mimic everything that both, Board Member Mina and President Rogel had sort of said. It's hard to evaluate the board and then, call out the board and say that they're not meeting sort of their responsibilities. But according to the Crowley Act, it gives the commission all of those authority and responsibilities. Now, a concern, I know she has a family engagement, but this report right here relies on thousands of families. And it would have probably been good for her to miss that family engagement to be here with all of you today. Now, the concern is, whenever the commissioner, I've had the opportunity of meeting her, speaking to her, having meetings with her, but some of my other colleagues have not. But, the concern of it is, the only time some of my colleagues that are on the board have sort of heard from her was when she was vetoing our decision. Now, that was the opportunity and the chance for her to call each member and have a conversation with them and say, listen, I feel as if I'm going to veto this situation because of X, Y, Z. And, to have that kind of experience, and then for her not to come or ever really explain herself, but to throw the Crowley Act in our faces, I think that is sort of, disrespectful, and that is a lack of trust. That is not a collaborative culture. I don't think it has come down from the top. It hasn't come down. Since I've been on the board, there has always been barriers. And, I've been on the board now the second longest after Mr. Escobar. So, I think a lot of these improvements, that the board sort of needs improvements on. I think some of them, I'm not going to call all of them out and say that all of them are in fact not true, but the things that we've collaborated on, like non-renewals, the commissioner vetoed, so like I'm trying to understand it fully. And I'm trying to, really be, trying to take this constructive criticism. But when you have when you have a state takeover that has sort of proven and led to not have been transparent, what it does is it kind of leads to tone deaf. It leads to it being in fact tone deaf. So, I do in fact take issue with it, definitely, because the law was just cited, but we don't even have authority to anything that was cited. So to say that we aren't ready for the return of local control is a complete, really quick, families come here all the time, and families don't ever have concerns about the school board. Their concerns is about the commissioner, the superintendent and their team, the lack of transparency, never with the school board. With that being said, is the areas of improvement the school board or is it RISE? That's my question.
And if I could just interject for a moment, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I understood the evaluation to be about, not about specific instances, but to be about the potentiality of returning certain functions to the board and whether or not there was a sufficient amount of resources to carry that through upon a transfer to the board of those functions, rather than specific instances that were being cited to say that, the board wasn't equipped to perform them, but really about resources and transitioning certain functions back to the board.
Thank you for that clarification. When looking at the indicators for this standard itself, they really speak to if the district will return to local control. Does the district have the actual capacity now to execute some of the functions that are outlined as best practices for and legal requirements for a school board? It doesn't necessarily speak to necessarily as much about imperial clearance, not necessarily about whether or not while you have the advisory responsibilities, have you also been doing all of these things? You have the advisory responsibilities you have right now in the context of the Rally Act. It's more about if the district will return to local control, does the capacity exist to actually have those functions? So if I may, just for context, just reading from the reports, just illustrative examples.
I was just going to say really quick, what I think we're trying to say, I don't want to speak for everybody, correct me if I'm wrong, it's hard to assess, is the school board ready when all of our authority and responsibilities lie with the commissioner? It's hard for us to have a fair assessment, we feel.
So I think you do still have some responsibilities, right, that you still do carry out. Now, let me just say that this is, we can go on detail and line by line on each of these and discuss it, or we can take the report for what it's intended to be, which is an analysis of point in time of where we are as a collective in this intervention. My strong suggestion would be to look at the data, and ask, what do we do about it and do we have the ability to address these issues and what will it take to do so? And there are lots of things that we can all do to that extent. The question came over earlier about, would the commissioner have called or should have called? There are things and actions that we are also prevented from doing. There's rolling quorums. There are issues of, calling one member to the next. But the commissioner is accessible. The commissioner has spent time with the leadership. The commissioner spends time in schools. The commissioner spends time with families. Having said that, our goal is to deliver the report, the findings of the report, and hear from you what subject and direction you have in order to inform the commissioner and what recommendations she might provide. So
Thank you. This one has been waiting for a while, and Ms. Hughes has been waiting for a while.
No, it's okay. I think, again, the report is what it is. We're not gonna change it, but I do think, just for myself and on behalf of my fellow board members, it feels personal, especially, it feels entirely misleading. And I understand this idea. It almost feels like the myth of meritocracy, where it's like, we can all be doing more, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And we already know some of us don't got boots, you know what I'm saying? Right now, the school board has no boots to even pull up. So, because it's a state takeover. And I think outside of the emotion of it not feeling good, that is less important to me. What is important is that all of the context that was given prior to Section 3 being reviewed was appreciated. And I think it kind of preempted some of the impact of what this said. Do you ever hear a story about yourself and you're like, that ain't true, where the hell you get that information from? That's what it feels like, which to me calls into question the fidelity of the other sections in the report. And I think for me, that is the biggest takeaway and problem with this, because if we're reading this, then we have to go through minutes of nuance and kind of like a prelude, which we appreciate, and sort of explaining away the nuance. That doesn't represent us. And it is misleading. And for me, it calls into question the fidelity of the other sections. And I think that is something that matters to me and should to everyone else.
Thank you, Ms. Newman. Ms. Hughes?
Thank you. I wouldn't necessarily disagree with my colleagues that the sort of presentation and the slides and just the capture of the statements of finding do not accurately reflect this board, our capacity, and our progress. I do think that in reading the report in its entirety, that nuance is there. And I get that you can't put every single thing that's in this 65+ page report in this slide deck that has lots of other information. So I think there's that tension there. To me, I think it's becoming a bit of a like chicken and egg situation. Like, how can we have capacity to do something that we're not allowed to do right now? But if we can't demonstrate that we might be able to do it, then how can we do it? And so I think what the context that you shared, that some of the capacity issue for the school board is internal to the school board and work and improvement that we have to do. But it's just as critical to name that we are not getting what we need even to currently fulfill all of our fiduciary and legal responsibilities necessarily because of a fractured relationship, sometimes with the district, sometimes with RIDE, sometimes with the city as a whole or in part. I think that context is really important, and I think that's unique to the school committee when we talk about it here, because we're the ones, as my colleagues have named, that sort of had more taken away from this entity than the others. Like the superintendent, not he himself, but his role and folks in this building are still doing work for students. The mayor is still doing his mayor things and the city council is doing their things. But our role shifted dramatically. And so something that I do want to name, I have seen a shift. In my personal opinion, I think this report is maybe the first time I've seen, both as a school board member that started this year, but also as a parent who has been engaging in some other formal structures prior to now. This is probably the clearest in the report as a whole, not this presentation per se, the clearest snapshot I've seen of whether we made any progress or not on the TAP. I think that the part that I disagreed with in this report was saying that the school board gets enough information about the TAP regularly. I think we get updates, but I think that we haven't had the same depth and detail that we're getting in this report. And so combining this with the CEPR report earlier, I think that this is a meaningful step. And whether, we may not all agree that this is a perfect capture of data, and we might have disagreements about some of the characterizations, but I want to name that this, as a community member, as a parent, and as a school board leader, it is meaningful that RIDE engaged SchoolWorks to do this review, because ultimately the point of this is to inform the community so we can all understand where we are in this intervention, so that we as a school board can make this consultation tonight and provide our recommendation to the commissioner. But regardless of what we decide tonight, it's her responsibility as part of this takeover, it's her responsibility now to go to the K-12 council likely next week, it sounds like, and make her recommendation of what should happen next with this intervention. And so I just want to name that this is a positive first step. Whatever we recommend tonight as a body, and whatever she recommends to the K-12 council, and whatever that body decides ultimately about the status of the intervention in Providence, I think it's critical that we use tonight and this level of detail and data, this level of conversation, as a stepping stone and a framework to model this better conversation and not find out information after the fact or make assumptions about what people might think or feel without having those conversations directly. And I just want to name one more time that I'm so pleased to see so many folks sitting out in the audience here. I know if you're watching at home, you can't see that right now, but there are lots and lots of folks here from the community. I see educators, I see elected officials, I see parents, I see more folks from RIDE and PPSD. I see principals, I see all sorts of folks here that care about this. And I want to name and thank both President Rogel and the team here from RIDE for taking this time to walk through this report with us, so that I know that we're taking a long time and asking a lot of questions, but this is a meaningful time, and we want to make sure that the recommendation and the consultation that we're providing to you, that you are bringing back to the commissioner, helps inform her decision next week. So that is all I have to say on that.
Thank you, Secretary Hughes. Any other comments, or should we let the presentation proceed? Mr. Matuk?
Thank you. There's a lot of great stuff that's happened in this boardroom. I mean, I think that clearly, from my perspective, the board has become the place where the community comes to be informed and engaged and to speak about not just the trials, but also the tribulations of PPSD and the great work that does happen and the progress that's happening. Now, it might not be as much progress as any of us would like at this point in the takeover, but there is progress happening. I think as a board, we can look at ourselves, or, a lot of you guys have only been here for a few months, and we can all acknowledge that there are things that we could have done better. And I think we shouldn't be so defensive that, if we're being told, by SurveyWorks that we're not a collaborative board in the way that they think a board should be in order to have the capacity to take responsibility for the school district, I don't think we should be defensive about it and say that's not fair. I think we should seek to learn. And this might not be the place to seek to learn in this particular meeting, but I don't think that SurveyWorks is, some sort of puppet and RIDE is a puppeteer trying to make gratuitous criticism of the school board. If SurveyWorks thinks that we're not doing a great job, we shouldn't be thin-skinned about it. We should seek to understand why. Because if we want to have the capacity to take back control of the district, we should learn about how we're perceived. I'm not saying that this is an entirely fair criticism, but I don't think that we should be thin-skinned. I think we should seek to learn why.
This is
Now-
not SurveyWorks though. This is SchoolWorks.
I'm sorry, SchoolWorks. I used the wrong word.
But it's not just a wrong word, it's different folks who are
Yes.
being interviewed and where these responses are coming from. SurveyWorks are families and students, right? And this is a collaboration of folks that are not just those people. I think we're more than ready to hear from our community when we need to step up. This is an outside entity that talks to folks, but is funneling through their perspective.
Well, listen, Ryan, I think, we have to accept as a board where we are, what we can control and what we can't control, and what has to happen for us to do right by the district. And, I think some of the habits that we're in are not particularly helpful. I mean, I don't think that the constant vilification of the commissioner is helpful at this point. I'm not saying that I think that the commissioner shouldn't be here tonight or shouldn't have come at other times, but I've also seen times when the first time that I was in this boardroom, I was out there after I was appointed, and it was after ASF, was first going to be closed. And I mean, some of the things that I heard said about the commissioner was you would think it was the Salem witch trial or something. It was really just over the top. And the commissioner is in charge, and the commissioner has responsibility. But RIDE is an organization with a lot of incredibly competent people, some of whom are sitting in front of us, others of whom we've worked with in our committees. The school district is not Superintendent Montañez. It's Superintendent Montañez. He's the head of it, but there's, dozens of incredible administrators who are doing the hard work and the leadership of the district. And so, I don't think if we want to, I don't know what to say. I think we need to sort of pivot as a board about how we look at RIDE and our relationship with RIDE and the pre-existing ideas we have about people who are there, and find ways to do better. I mean, I would ask Dr. Rodin, if I could, thank you for your service, and I know that this is your last meeting here. The thing that I think Mr. Stevens had said.
I'm so sorry.
No, I think Mr. Stevens said something that was really relevant before, which is where is the assessment of RIDE? And while maybe this, report is not the place for it, the elephant in the room is that there's an incredible amount of distrust between the community and RIDE. Now, you could argue about where that came from, but that's clearly an obstacle to an effective return to local control. So,
if you agree that there's distrust between the community and RIDE, and I don't see how you couldn't agree with that, like Mr. Rodon, like what would you say to Mr. Eccleston if he's coming into your position? You know, what would be your recommendation to rebuild trust between RIDE and the PPSD community so that we could get the relationships to a point where they can succeed and not be prisoner of the past? Thank you, Ms. Matuk.
Thank you, Mr. President. Following legislative procedure. You know, I think, listen, folks, so interventions are hard. There's no question about it, particularly when interventions are an opportunity to do something different. That's what they are, and we can take it or we can leave it, but it's an opportunity to do something different. Is it perfect? No, they never are. You know, I think, you know, as I leave, and I'm, let me just say, grateful for the opportunity to have served and support the work and be excited about the work that the district is doing. I think, you know, from my perspective, I think individually I work with some of you. I think you don't need to be as direct, transparent, and accessible. I think you will find Dr. Eccleston to be just as that, direct, accessible, and transparent. Are we perfect? No, but you know, the act of building trust is an act that takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of intentionality. I think you will find that in provided that we continue in this direction, that the next phase of the work, you're going to see a lot more on the ground activity, on the ground focus around teaching and learning, on the ground engagement, about hopefully building your own capacity, right? Like, because it just, you know, it doesn't happen naturally. Like the role of a school board member is incredibly complex. And, you know, having worked with school board members here and school board members nationally, you know, you have one of the most difficult jobs in public service. Why? Because you're supposed to not only just be experts on budgeting, the single largest portion of the city budget, you're also supposed to be experts in hiring procedures, you're supposed to be experts on teaching and learning, you're supposed to be experts on every possible thing that is before you, a fairly complex, almost impossible task. One potential area of guidance that I would have is, you know, think about what potentially training might look like. Think about what you might want to see to grow as your own capacities, and the district would and the agency will have to go with you in that partnership, because it's not going to be possible to establish a thoughtful, you know, transition whenever that happens without that engagement and that direct partnership, because both parties need to learn how to do this in the long run. Otherwise, the thing that I would not want for any of us is to be here 10 years from now talking about a different intervention or what happened with the last intervention. So I think you'll find Dr. Eccleston to be incredibly engaged in that conversation.
Thank you, Dr. Lozano.
President.
Just super brief, let's follow up on that, and then Mr. Singh, questions and questions. I think he's gonna go. The only thing that I would say then in follow up to that is if I was gonna give advice to Dr. Eccleston, it would be to be here. Because I've said this to Mr. Darrow and other people, you know, at RIDE over time, like RIDE's absence from this room is a problem. Whether it's the commissioner or Dr. Eccleston or Christopher, or Brian or Mario or whomever it is, like that's a problem, I think, as far as rebuilding trust with the board and the community. So I would like to see Dr. Eccleston here every meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Matuk. Mr. Stevens?
I think when I remember, I mean, this isn't gonna, you know, comments to yours, but I just was stating, like, I remember when you first had gotten appointed, the community had came and they, you know, were very upset and angry, you know, with things that were sort of taking place with their schools closing. And I wouldn't say what they said was in fact over the top, but I would say there was, you know, very emotional and concerned. You know, one of the main things that was said in the SchoolWorks report was that, you know, the school board should in fact, you know, be more qualified or something like that. But typical school boards across the nation is elected. Normally, people elect school board members that are, community members, soccer moms, things like that. It's never a bunch of educators on the school board. It's always been a community position historically. So, when they're saying that, we're not credentialed, we're not qualified, that is false. And, I think, by us just coming, I would say I think we do. And there was training provided. President Rogel did make sure that there was training provided. I would say, making sure that board members attend those trainings is an area of feedback. But, Mr. Matuk, I know one of the main reasons why I think we was a bit, concerned about the report and then about sort of the role of the board. And we should take it as feedback. But what happened was he listed a bunch of things that the school board currently doesn't even have control of, which kind of was a bit hesitant and confusing because, all of those duties that was just mentioned lies at the commissioner's hands. So I think that was my only hesitation to the whole thing was, a bunch of, comments or, the role of the board was sort of communicated. But, when it was communicated, it really was talking about our authority that was taken away. And when there's not collaboration from the top down, it's hard for the board to work together. It's hard for the board to come together. It's hard for the board to pass policy when we don't have the, the capacity of staff. We've been asking for capacity of staff for multiple times, but the superintendent's office makes it so difficult. So to say, we're not sort of where we are when we're asking for help, we're asking for support, we're trying to get people for policy, we're trying to get people to understand different things, and the district refuses that. That is sort of when I say it's tone deaf to say we need improvements in these areas, but we're explicitly asking for improvement, and then we don't have the authority that is being stated. So that's my last comment.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. Ms. Newman?
Yeah, last one too. I think that, Mr. Matuk, I respect you, and but I have to say, I think you might have just gaslit half the board with your comments, because I don't think the board needs training while we're all open to education and are very educated. I have a master's degree in urban education. We have training, we're educated, we know how to collaborate. We don't need training and we don't need to work harder, we need power. That's what the school board needs. We're not able to, it's like a, it's a relationship where you're asking the committee, the board who has no power, to collaborate with the entity that has all the power. That is an unequal power balance. So that's what we're talking about. It's a structural inequity related to power, not will, not trying hard, not a lack of training, right? And I think we have to be really clear about that, especially given the makeup of this board, being mostly folks of color, mostly folks who may not present as professional, educated, traditional folks who are worthy of a conversation in an audience with the commissioner, but we do. And to be told otherwise is being gaslit, it's being disrespected, it's racially charged as well, whether it's intended or not. But I definitely take offense to that, not just for myself, because I'm very used to it, but on behalf of even folks who are younger than me sitting right here, who are professional and try hard and are organizing every single day on behalf of community. And if you're going to say that folks from RIDE need to be here every day, that's exactly what Mr. Stevens said about the commissioner. So what makes what you're saying any different than what he asserted? We just have to be clear. And yes, and this is not about the superintendent. He's here every single month. I just want you to know that this is not about your job as a superintendent. You're showing up, you're talking to communities, you're collaborating with the board. I think our first meeting might have been a little bit tense, but I respect you. I respect you in the job you do, and you're in the trenches. And what I want to see is power be returned, not only to this board, but to you. That's what I want to see, because we trust you. I trust you. I've seen what you've done in Providence. I've seen where you're going, and I want you to be unshackled and for us to get behind you and support your vision. So that's what I'm here for, and I trust this board to do that.
Thank you, Ms. Newman. Let me comment real quick on Mr. Matuk's comments, because Ms. Newman, I don't be dishonest, but this is how I took it. I'm always open to feedback. We ask our educators to go through the professional development all the time. We ask our building administrators to go through professional development all the time. Our students are constantly going through benchmark tracking, evaluation, repetitively. So, I took your comments to mean that we should be open to feedback, and there is room for growth, and we could act more efficiently as a board. So I just wanted to offer how I interpreted the comment. I'm not saying your perspective is invalid, but that was just my perspective on the comment. Mr. Dean?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I didn't take anything personally from what he said. Of course, there was some triggering words like villainize the commissioner. I'm like, I was just stating facts. I haven't met her. I haven't met with her. I don't know if Mr. Stephen had to initiate every single time that he communicated with the commissioner, or if she reached out to you. But most of the conversations I've had with even the superintendent, they've initiated that. Knowing that everybody here is super busy. I mean, we have people running complete after-school programs and working in different positions like HR, super busy. So for me, it has to do with accountability. The community's making an effort to really show up. I mean, for me, my first meeting was a 360 meeting, and we had hundreds of people here. And the person that had the power to make the decision didn't even show up. That's disrespectful to the parents that made time. That's disrespectful to us that made time. And such large decisions like, yeah, we're opening new schools, but then we're closing schools without parents' input into that. So where is the collaboration in that? And that makes me question the entire report, because I read the first few things, everything about like the original findings. Oh, we're doing better. This grew. We're in the beginning stages of this. But then when it gets to the board, it's like, oh, they're not ready. They don't have the capacity to do this. And I'm asking these questions like, where do they get that from? And I'm going to be reading the report just to find that, just because it just seems kind of like completely opposite than everything else in the report. It's almost like the report is painting a picture of like, oh, everything has to stay the same way so we could do better, and not return power to the board, who represents the community. So basically what it's saying, the community shouldn't have power to make decisions,
Right.
because we are representing the community. So for me, I think power needs to go to the community, because it's their kids in school. It's their lives being affected, and decisions are being made without the community having a say in that. The 360 is the perfect example. They found out in January, and the school, basically, that was it. The decision was made without them. Every other school was the same way. So, and then in March they found out about it. So those are the kind of things that we're talking about. Like, it has to do with power. We have no power to do anything in regards to a decision making for you. We can say recommendations, but for us, it's important that the person or the people who do have that power to be here present and engage with us, so that we can connect them and let them know this is what the community wants and needs. There are parents here that, imagine coming to these meetings like, oh, there's nothing we can do or say. Whatever we say here is going to go straight to the commissioner. She makes a decision and that's it. So that's crucial for everybody here and everybody at home that they didn't make into the meeting, so that they know that their voices are being heard and respected and valued.
Thank you, Mr. Nina. Mr. Chairman Mango, sorry I skipped you. Go ahead.
I just wanted to make this quick comment. The commissioner isn't here because she doesn't care about community or the school board comments, opinions. I mean, when I joined the school board, I believe that we could work with the commissioner and the superintendent to make positive changes in our schools. However, for the past 3 years, that hasn't been the case. The commissioners continue to make important decisions, without including the community or the school board. She continued to ignore our concern, and when there's an opportunity to collaborate with the board, she vetoes it every time. So this is what leads to big problems.
Thank you, Chairman. We've been going around in circles on this one slide for a while now. Are there any more slides?
There are, Mr. President. I was
Okay.
actually going to raise the issue that we have several slides to go through.
All right. Let's proceed with the presentation.
Thank you.
So moving on from standard 3 to standard 4, the other entity that was evaluated was also the city of Providence, because they have a responsibility in terms of governance of schools. If this school district will return to local control, there's 2 findings. One about ensuring fiscal.
If I may just briefly, because I don't, there's just one point that I want to be clear about. I believe the commission has vetoed one item only that has come out of this school committee. No,
3 just this year.
How many items has the commission vetoed?
3.
2 items. So just
Mr. President?
Let Mr. Rodon.
I'll finish the statement and then we can
Okay.
respond.
I just want to say, like, a number of actions have been taken by this group over the years, and the commissioner has never, ever vetoed those items up until this year. So I just want to, put that on the record as a matter of important factual information. But thank you.
Mr. President,
Mr. Stevens.
we've had 2 administrative non-renewals be overturned. We had a teacher non-renewal, over 50-something teachers that was overturned. So if you do that, that's over 60 vetoes that the commission has made. There's been also multiple schools that closed. The board took action on a lot of those schools that was closed and said, don't close them, and the commission has still closed them. So that's more than 60 vetoes.
Again, I just wanted to get on the record that the commissioner has not vetoed a number of the actions that have come with this board. For the most part, all the actions of this board have been upheld, just on the record.
And that's not a true statement to put on the record. That's not true.
So I think we're getting caught up in the semantics of what a veto is versus not following our recommendation. I think there have been numerous situations, as you stated, Mr. Stevens, where we've given a recommendation that has not been followed. And then I guess it's whether we want to count,
One vote is, yeah, correct.
but we don't need to get into the semantics of that.
But there has been 3. There's been 3 vetoes.
I don't think we need to deliberate that. Can you please proceed with the presentation?
Yes, sir. So for municipal capacity, there's 2 standards. One is ensuring fiscal and legal compliance, and the second is demonstrating community leadership. For these standards, first, they find that the SchoolWorks finds that the municipal entity fulfills most of its legal responsibilities to support the success of the LEA. However, it is unclear whether it fulfills its fiscal responsibilities as it pertains to the LEA. Standard 4.2 identifies the municipal entity as beginning to provide value-added leadership in galvanizing community and municipal assets to effectively support the LEA. Again, in the report, more context is given that identifies both strengths, progress, and areas of growth. So lastly, getting to the section of receiving formal consultation from the PPS school board. Just a quick recap. We released our reports last week. We're receiving formal consultation. All of the feedback provided in this presentation and additional consultation will be taken back by RIDE. It will be used to inform the commissioner's recommendation to the K-12 council, who has the actual authority vested in state statute to make this determination. That recommendation we anticipate going at the August council meeting, which is on August 29th. And just recapping again, the potential recommendation options are up on the slide.
Thank you, Mr. Darrow. So I just want to make a note that the vote was supposed to happen at the consent agenda, but we're here. So we're going to take this item out of order. We're going to move up to discussion and possible vote on continued state intervention in Providence Public Schools. We're going to take 4.1 now. And so I'm opening up the floor for any discussion. If there's any questions that we need to make of our RIDE representatives, if there's any questions that you guys want to ask of me, I'd like to first set the stage and say that consultation is ambiguous. There's no clarity in the regulations or general law regarding what consultation means. I have chosen, as the president of the board, to interpret consultation as an official vote from the board, so that it's on the record, so that we're speaking as one voice. So I just wanted to set that stage, that consultation is ambiguous. However, I'm choosing it to interpret it this way, and I think it's the most effective way to use our voice. Ms. Hughes, you had your hand up, and Mr. Stevens had his hand up. Ms. Hughes?
Would it be possible to go back to the previous slide?
Of course.
Oh, no, one more. With the municipal capacity, sorry, so the standards 4.1 and 4.2. I just want to make a comment that when we as a board are formulating our recommendation or our consultation tonight, that if we are asking for a return to local control, and if we are asking for that in a particular time frame, that whether or not we dispute what this report says about our own readiness as a body, that return to local control would mean that we also feel that both the LEA or the district itself and also the municipality is ready to also resume all of their responsibilities as it relates to the district when it is not under state control. And I know we've been talking for a long time, but I don't want to gloss over the municipality being unclear whether it fulfills its fiscal responsibilities to the district or not. I think we spent a lot of time in the spring and early summer talking with the city, talking in finance committee meetings, talking in our bigger board meetings here about the budget for our district and about the underfunding from the city of Providence. We know that there is ongoing litigation and dispute and mediation, and I don't want to misinterpret or say the wrong legal term here, but we understand there's a lot of controversy about what the city's responsibility is to the district while it's under state control. But I personally have grave concerns that if they are disputing that now, that they are demonstrating a capacity that they are going to fully fund our district when they're in charge of it. And so I'm naming this now to my fellow board members to consider when we talk about asking for a return to local control in whatever timeline that's going to be, because it's not an if, it's a when. That we consider timelines that are reasonable to also ensure that the district will have those resources. We noted that earlier in this report, that some of the progress we haven't made yet is because we don't have the resources here at the district. We spent a lot of time talking this spring and early summer about losing dedicated, wonderful staff, about layoffs and non-renewals, and that the dispute about like the specifics of that, but ultimately it comes down to a budget that's too small. And so I need us to really think about this piece, this municipal capacity, particularly as it relates to the fiscal compliance. Thank you.
That's a very fair point, Secretary Hughes. Mrs. Stevens?
Really quick, so the discussion, is the discussion geared towards this or the action that's going to be taking place?
It's regarding our consultation. So both, either.
Oh, okay. All right, so I'm sorry. Okay, so I just have a couple of questions really quick about just the SchoolWorks report. So the report was made public on Friday, that's correct? When was the report released to the media?
Also on Friday. It was.
Okay, all right, that's incorrect. The report was released to the media the day before.
I'm sorry, I apologize. I was interpreting the question as when could it be publicly made available to the media for public reporting. That was Friday.
Okay.
It was provided on embargo the Thursday night.
So do you guys think that the report that was shared with the media should have probably been shared with the school board the same day?
It was shared with school board leadership the same day.
So I will say that we also got an embargoed copy, and embargoed tends to mean that we're not under the authority to release it either. And then it was released to me under the impression that it was going to be publicly made available the immediate next morning, which it was. So Mr. Stevens, I did have an embargoed copy.
Okay, okay. So it wasn't able to be shared amongst the board fully. Okay. True or false? Was the superintendent senior advisor preparing principals ahead of their scheduled review with SchoolWorks?
Absolutely not.
Please, man. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Absolutely not. We met with administrators just to let them know that they are going to be visited and that this process was going to take place. That's all that was said.
Appreciate that. Since the takeover, we have experienced significant turbulence. We've had two superintendents, one of whom was fired for alleged inappropriate, hiring an individual. There have been multiple investigations under our current structure. Following the report, over 40 Black and brown administrators were either demoted, non-renewed, or left for without employment. There were also allegations into grade inflation, which led to an independent investigation by the commissioner's office. RIDE informed the board that such allegations were sustained. Earlier this year, the DOJ began investigating the district for similar issues that the board had previously raised. In 2022, the school board, the community and the school board called for a superintendent search involving community input. Instead of the commissioner having a process, she appointed a superintendent and cited the Crowley Act. My question is, under these circumstances that has taken place, do you guys think that under state control should probably be extended, or do you think that there has been, in fact, a lack of transparency to the point where you believe the community may want the schools back sooner?
Mr. Stevens, we have provided our report. The findings of the report are clear. There has been progress. There continues to be progress. we stand by the findings of the report, which were independent from us, both Harvard and SchoolWorks. What you, as the board, chooses to do in terms of your consultation, that is within your purview.
Thank you. Last question, well, not even a question, just a comment. So with that said, and with all that I've read and, the discussions that we had today, I personally ask that the board tonight, that Governor McKee, Helica Infante Green, the Commission of Education, the K-12 Council, return the control of our schools to the Providence School Board. We will figure out when that is today. If this is not done, I urge that the Providence School Board, the Providence City Council, and the Mayor of Providence to issue a joint statement to the Rhode Island House Speaker, Senate President, and General Assembly demanding a revision of the Crowley Act to restore local control of our schools by the end of the year.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. Chairman Mahingo.
Thank you, Mr. President. Today we face an important choice about the future of our schools. We have the chance to end the state takeover, which has been in place for the past 5 years. This takeover was supposed to help our schools, but it has not worked out as promised. For example, we had a chance to keep some of our teachers. The commissioner stopped it and vetoed the board recommendations. We also have seen unfair treatment of our staff with layoff and salary increases for central offices administrators, while the teachers are let go. This is wrong and shows the lack of respect for our educators. School has been closed without consulting our community or the board, which has hurt a lot of our students. We have seen troubling issues on how Black and Brown administrators are treated, including unfair demotion and lack of support. Recently, the Commissioner of Education extended the superintendent's contract without talking to the board or the community. These decisions only add the frustration and shows a lack of respect of our input. Ending the state takeover or recommending the commissioner to end the state takeover means that we can regain control and work together to fix these problems. We need to work to make decisions that will reflect the needs of our students and our communities. By voting to end the state takeover, we are choosing to bring back local controls, transparency, and fairness. Let's make the right choice for our school, our students, and our community.
All right, so let's move into let's move into a motion and have a discussion on a motion. Do I have a motion?
Yes.
Vice President Escobar?
So I think it's even appropriate to submit this to the clerk after in terms of an official motion. And before I state the motion, I do believe all entities are looking to find a pathway where there is return to local control. And I think one of the things I think about is what is the responsible way to do that. And I think PPSD, RIDE, and the city, quite frankly, need to have those conversations, a lot of logistical conversations, and making sure that we are responsibly doing a return to local control, even if there might be political energy to, end it sort of immediately. I mean, I think Mayor Smiley has said multiple times he might need sort of a year, right, in terms of return to local control. So I think I would want to give trust to those entities in terms of doing that. In conversations with folks, it feels like no one wants to go the Central Falls route where, 30 years under, state control. I believe there is synergy in terms of wanting to go back to local control. I think it's about how we do that and do that responsibly. So this motion, it's a long motion, but I move that the Providence School Board recommends to the Rhode Island State Education Commissioner, in accordance with statewide regulations 200 RICR 20056 and Rhode Island General Law 16-7.1-5.1, that the Providence Public School District immediately ends its existing current turnaround status by the end of the 2024-2025 school year. Further, we recommend that a transition plan be developed and implemented to return to oversight authority to the Providence School Board, ensuring an effective transition back to local control. This transition plan should include a designated transition period during which the local school board will assume certain oversight responsibilities while maintaining appropriate state guidance and to ensure continued improvement and stability in the district. Additionally, this transition plan should incorporate meaningful community input to guide the process, ensuring that the perspectives and needs of the district stakeholders are considered and addressed throughout the transition period. I make that motion, and I will give this to the school board clerk to have that amongst the school board and amongst interested stakeholders.
There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second? The second by
For discussion, I think it's just important to identify the means by which this will be communicated. So is it a communication that's being sent, or is it a resolution that's being drafted? So I think we can encompass it anyway, but there should be some official.
resolution.
Yeah, we could put it as a formal resolution. Yeah.
So there's a motion, there's a second. I'm opening up the motion for discussion. So now discussion is around this motion. Is there discussion around the motion?
Wait, I thought we need a second, right?
Chairman Lahane, go ahead.
I do want to continue discussion.
Vice President Escobar.
So what's in front of us is, in terms of where I'm at, there is a recommendation of a year. I think that's what the mayor has said multiple times. But this is also including a transition plan. So I think if there is conversations between these entities around if it is 2 years and they're comfortable with that and that's what it takes and that's a responsible return to local control, I think that's fine as well. And I think I think the end game of making this statement is a transition plan and putting stuff into writing, right? I'm sorry, I'm talking about me personally, not about this motion, because I believe there's a lot of energy. We believe there's a lot of energy around ending it within a year. But I do want to say, in terms of me as a person that made that motion, is voting for this motion, I want to say publicly, this is without conversation, knowing RIDE and the city are having conversations, right? So I want to make sure that they're in alignment on this. So if they come together and they say, you know what, a year sounds good, but maybe we need more time, I, as an individual school board member, want to sort of allow for that. But I think we've been given this opportunity pretty quickly to kind of sort of act and react. And we've heard multiple times, 1 year, right? Like, we just need 1 year. So maybe this is the year, but I want to stress, I want to leave other entities to be able to responsibly think about this. And sometimes just rushing a decision could do more harm than good. And I also want to say to the board members, like, to this day, I'm not a fan of the Crowley Act policy. I think it's left, it's been ambiguous. I think it allows some sort of aspect where it sets people up for failure, entities for failure, and the sort of takeover structure. I've never been a fan of where we're at. And as someone that voted against the takeover when it felt like you were just standing in front of an entity, like there was a lot of energy, like, let's do the takeover, this is the right thing to do. I also believe just rushing back to local control without thinking about the long term, a responsible way to sort of do that. And I think it's even looking at our governance models. I think it's even looking at what is what I would love to see, a true partnership between the state and the city. Because no matter what happens, we need Providence education to continuously improve. And no matter, when we go back to local control, it's up to the state to continuously do that and have that sort of investment. So that's where I want to stay. I want to stress responsibility. At least that's where I'm at, but the motion still stands.
Mr. President?
Mr. Stevens.
Yeah, I think, if we're gonna make a motion, we need to stand by the motion. I don't think we need to say, well, if. I think we ought to make a motion. Anything that the board votes on today should be that, and that is what we stick to. I don't think there should be maybe here, there. According to state law, it says when the school board returns control of the schools, which means if the school board votes today that it should end at the end of this upcoming school year, 24-25, that's how it should go. It shouldn't be, well, this political party don't want it, and to 2 years, this person doesn't want to hear. It needs to end if the school board today votes that it ends at the end of 24-25.
That's not correct statutorily.
Speak to me.
So the statute just provides that there's consultation that has to.
No. I'm speaking of the district's responsibilities. All school districts, the board is responsible for the school district if it wasn't for local control. Am I right or wrong?
If it wasn't for.
If it wasn't under local control,
If it was.
who's responsible?
If it was under local control, it's the board's responsibility for the care and custody of the school district.
That's what I'm talking about.
Subject to any other special legislation. For example, unlike other school districts throughout the state, the Providence School Board does not negotiate collective bargaining agreements. So the responsibility to negotiate collective bargaining agreements prior to the takeover is vested in the chief executive officer of the municipality, the mayor.
I'm happy that you mentioned that. So what we're currently in as well as a board, and this would have been the only way I would have considered 2 years, is a restructure. So the board will now be hybrid starting in January, as everyone knows. We don't know who's going to be responsible over collective bargaining agreements or over the budget. We have to discuss that between the mayor's office and between city council or something.
Unless the legislation is repealed, it would go back to the mayor as the
Right.
mayor's responsibility.
So that's still a discussion that needs to be had under a new structured board. But currently, the school board is responsible for the operations of the district under local control. And if this board today votes to end it 24-25, that's what the board needs to stick to. And that's what any other party needs to also agree with if they're going to send out a statement.
Mr. Stevens, I hear your point loud and clear. I just want to clarify a couple of points. So the resolution, as it was proposed by Vice President Escobar, accomplishes a few things. One, it fulfills our obligation to consult, right? I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm clarifying for the public and people who may be watching at home. So one out of the 3 options, continue the turnaround action plan, introduce a new turnaround action plan, or end a state intervention with the possibility of a transition period. That's what our resolution accommodates. It recommends that we end the state takeover and that we start drafting a transition plan effective as soon as we're ready, with the end of this current school year being the barometer, being the end line, right? And then it also kind of defines what that transition plan should include. Community input. During that transition phase, we are asking that certain authorities be reverted back to the school board. So it outlines a couple of things. So when we send this resolution, that's going to be the content of the resolution. I believe Vice President Escobar was qualifying his vote, and I think he's fine. On the record, if he wants to speak as Mr. Escobar and qualify his votes, I would encourage anybody who wants to qualify the votes for that. But when we send this communication, it's going to be the content of that resolution. Thank you, Mr. Stevens. Mr. Nino?
Yeah, first of all, thank you everybody for being here. I know it's getting late. I'm here, like literally, just withstanding all this background right now. But I know that this is such an important matter right now. I really do appreciate the recommendations for the consultation to return the school by the end of the 2024-2025 school year. Mainly because, the reason I wanted to be on the board was to represent the community. The community felt during the past, 4 years that they lost their voice, that they lost their power, that they lost something that was supposed to be in place for them. And the one place that has a say or able to do anything is the school board. Like, we're here to represent the community, and the power was taken away from them. So parents can come to the meetings, they can say all these different things, and at the end of it all, it's gonna be on the commissioner's hand and the school department to decide on what's gonna happen. So for me, returning it back to the city makes it come back home to the community. The community is able to access a lot of things. I mean, the commissioner has not been accessible to me as a board member. I don't know how it's been for other school board members or the community. But if it's that challenging during the just 1 year that I've been here, I can only imagine if we keep going this way, it's basically all the decisions are made without the community. But they're the ones that are going to be the most impacted by this. The staff at the school gets a paycheck. The superintendent, everybody below, they get a paycheck. But parents, their kids, they're going to suffer the consequences of every decision made for the rest of their life. If their kids don't know how to read right or math and all these things, they're going to have that impact for the rest of their life. So I definitely want the power to go back to the school board and the city and the parents to be able to make decisions and have a voice in this decision, because what's the point of even having a school board without power? And I think that that's the huge piece of it. When I joined the school board and very excited, I'm like, I'm willing to do whatever it's going to do. I came in right in the middle of this, where, yeah, we get to come to the meeting, we can voice this, we say things that could be on record, that we, voice the community's opinion, but we have no power to make a decision without specific people in the school department or the commissioner's office. And that's a huge concern for the community. And that's something that this report doesn't really show. And that's something that, for me, I hear it every day in the community. As somebody that does all these community events and every day speaks with community members, this is a huge piece. So I definitely will, I definitely want the power to go back to the city and the school board and the community as soon as possible. Of course, making sure that we do have a proper plan in place.
Thank you, Mr. Nina. Any discussion on the motion? Ms. Newman?
Yeah, just seconding definitely what Mr. Neiman just said. And I just want to say just two things. One, thank you all for staying here this late. I know we all have families and we're tired, but we're passionate, right? So that's why we're still here. I just think, I think like what I urged us to vote on when we were thinking about 360 and AP Norris and Carrie Tuttleby, that we have an opportunity to do something different. We have an opportunity to choose. There's been a lot of decisions where the community has not been involved, and they've shown up in droves and, the hundreds in some circumstances to vote City Hall, into this building, to be very blunt about, like, we were not involved. We don't co-sign this. We don't endorse this. This is not okay. And I feel like throughout my time here on the school board, I'm like, man, I feel like we keep choosing wrong because there's this plan that's in motion, and it almost feels like ego that we're too tied into to like actually do the right thing. And I don't like that for us, but I do feel like, again, this is another moment where we don't have to get caught up in like the plan. We don't have to get so egotistical in the sense that we feel that we can't admit like we need to do this a better way. And for me, that better way is with community. I think like America as a country sometimes has a history, right? And like it's the American brand to like kind of go all over the world and tell folks how they need to live and how they need to set up their governments and how, like, you know what I mean? Like, and this is that. Like, this is exactly that. This is the state saying, you community, you don't know what you're doing. We don't trust you. We know how to do it better. And collective impact doesn't matter. We're going to use a hierarchical, imperialist structure to govern your schools and your families and your kids' lives. And we need to choose different. That this is no different than America going to other countries and telling them that they need to set up democracy in our way. And to some folks, it might sound like hyperbole or poetry, but I can tell you as a parent of kids in the Providence school system that it's true. And that I believe it's our obligation as a school board to always vote in favor of what community wants. And community wants a say, community wants a voice. And this is not about vilification, this is about keeping it real. If the commissioner showed up to meetings every month and was accountable to us in community, I might be voting differently. You know what? Like, I trust you. Like, I see the collaboration, I get it. Yeah, like, so far, my months being on the school board, I cannot in good faith vote in that way because I don't see the collaboration from the top. I don't see the transparency or the trust. All I've seen are students, families, teachers, principals be ignored, including board members. And so I don't want this to continue anymore. I urge my school board members to vote in favor of community, right? And to not let yet another opportunity to do the right thing pass us by.
Thank you, Ms. Newman. Any other discussion on the motion?
President?
No, go ahead.
I'm so sorry.
Mr. Stevens, you have the
I
last word.
love talking, I'm so sorry. I'm
Mr.
done.
Stevens, and then
That's
we
why I'm
take-
always on the news. Listen, I don't want the leadership team to think I was calling you up, Vice President, ask about anything, because I do understand that there's a lot of people in y'all ears right now as it pertains to this vote that we're taking. The only thing I'm just requesting is that, we stand strong and true to the vote. I think the commissioner in RIDE has made some progress, as they stated, and I think throughout this transition plan, they will be able to allow us information on how to sustain a lot of this progress that we made. And I think that that's the reason why the mayor has in fact started, sorry, I'm stuttering, I'm tired. The mayor has in fact started his transition team over a year ago. So I know his team has been having a lot of time to transition. and stop that process. So I think that a year is what has been mentioned, a year is what's on the floor. I just highly urge that we vote a year. 5 years have been, ups and downs, we've built relationships, people have come, people have gone, we've had 2 superintendents. But there's been a lot of good times as well. And I think that, it's time for the Providence Providence School District and RIDE to part in that way and to restore the duties of the school board back to the school, back from the duties of the school district back to the school board. And I'm not just saying it to say it, but I'm just saying, when we speak of community has had concerns tirelessly about the commissioner, about RIDE, about the takeover, about how the structure has been. And I just feel as if, this is the best decision for the community. So I stand firm to that. I believe that it should end. I think that whatever the board decides, any other outside party should in fact agree because they have had more than enough time to prepare for this time frame. So.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. I say, let's call the vote. Let's do a roll call vote. This is an important vote. So let's call a roll. Madam Clerk.
Aye.
Tyrell Stevens.
Aye.
Mike Jean.
Aye.
Travis Escobar.
Aye.
Melissa Hughes.
Aye.
Tony Akins. Aye. George Mitchell.
Aye.
Michael Nina.
Aye.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The motion is approved unanimously. Thank you, colleagues, for all of your work and collaboration on getting to this recommendation. And I know that there've been a lot of sustained and robust dialogues, and I appreciate everyone's feedback and input on that. Is it okay if we take like a 3-minute recess for us to use the restroom and stuff? Or is that cool? All right, let's do like a 3-minute recess. We're at ease.
It's good too.
At this point, I'm staying. I don't have. I even come here to start trouble. Nice. This was a nightmare. One by one by one.
Yeah. Trying to walk, that's all.
Long day. Good stuff.
Yeah.
Let's just listen to what I have to say.
I know, you work over
I understand. They don't have a 10 I'm not giving them.
Sure, she's taking this thing.
Ask him what he said. I'm gonna move every girl out. So there's
I go to South. My senior and my. One time, 2 times South. I was fine.
All right. Guys, just FYI, the mics are still hot. Even though we're at ease, the mics are hot.
Your mics are on. Just
mics
just
are
in
hot.
case you're having like a personal conversation.
Even though we're at ease. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe my multiply. Right. Most people think there's someday going to be at that point.
Oh, yeah.
Where are you trying to get the market? Where are you trying to
Yeah, good.
I know.
It's really interesting context. Their response.
Did you just listen to me to get the paper?
Oh, it's for,
Oh, but you just help around.
yeah.
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 Calling this meeting back into session. Next item on the agenda is consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes from the meeting in June and July? There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Next item on the agenda is review of homeschool candidates. Is there a representative here from the district to speak on this matter? Welcome, Mr. Catone.
Good evening. So, so the candidates that are before you this evening have met the requirements of Rhode Island general law as it pertains to homeschool students, and also is in alignment with our school board policy for homeschool approval as well. So I submit those names to you tonight for approval.
Is there a motion to approve the district's recommendation for homeschool approval? There's a motion. Ms. Aiken has a question.
Sure.
How many students?
I think it's 102.
Ooh,
Which traditionally, the beginning of the school year, that's when we get our big influx, and then we get a few maybe every month, but this is when that happens.
any further questions, Ms. Aiken?
No further.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Mahingable. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Next is public comment, and I apologize to our one member of the public who signed
I
up
was,
for
I
comment.
was, I was like, it's a mission at this point, you know what I mean? I said, they want to hear from me.
Our apologies. It was,
No, it's all good.
thank you for staying, Mr. Spencer. Mr. Spencer, can begin when you're ready.
Yeah, I'm not gonna, try and be brief, but a little bit of grace would be appreciated because a lot happened tonight since I had made plans. So statement and everything else that I was gonna go with is out the window. I was with some teachers and parents today because you all sparked a certain amount of conversation amongst a lot of people by bringing up the idea of making this motion, right? It's the timing of it. It's this report came out and there's this recommendation and we're going to discuss something here. And it was brought up here tonight that this is the place, despite being told time and time again, the school board doesn't have any power. We've seen over the past couple of years the power of this room. We've all lived a lot together, like most of us anyway, for 5 years, coming from different places. And in reflecting today with a group of people, my intent was actually to come here and kind of reflect on some things because we were teachers and we were talking about the beginning of a school year, what that's like for our families, that's like for kids. And the amount of chaos that some of us, myself highly included, a lot of chaos that's come in these last few years. Conflict, discussions at each other instead of with each other. And I even was going to call out some of the people at RIDE as being well-intentioned, remembering some conversations that I had initially with the commissioner when she came here. And something really popped up that stuck in my head and that we talked about. And I was a member of the Johns Hopkins review team. So I walked then. And I remember thinking, I was an elementary school student when I first went to school, some of these things, like I can remember them from being really little in Providence. And then for a 20-year career as a teacher in Providence, I can remember these things as being problematic. So everything like Vice President Escobar said that came along with the takeover. And then how we got to where we are. And I remember that Dr. Domingo Morel came into the room and met with the Johns Hopkins team. And he warned us about a state takeover. He told us that they rarely are successful. And this is a person who literally wrote the book on state takeovers. And he said they often leave communities marginalized. And I'm assuming positive intentions. I'm not here to vilify the commissioner or anybody else. But let's look at the reality of what's happened over the past 5 years. Now, it started with educators and teachers. I'm proud former board member of PTU. I'm with the State Federation of Teachers now. And we kind of were the first people to have the mantle as being combative. But part of it is because we were told that we were the main problem. Despite the fact that the Johns Hopkins report said that the system had been failing all stakeholders for generations, we immediately felt isolated, called out, and told by somebody who came in, you need us to fix you because you're the problem. And not a lot of people back this up. I mean, teachers' unions present a complicated kind of situation. But what happened is, and I think it's indisputable at this point, over 5 years, we have seen families say, we feel marginalized. We feel like they're doing it to us and they're not doing it with us. I would ask for a little bit of grace from a little bit.
Just a little bit, I know you waited a long time, so a little bit.
Right. Then, so essentially, we've seen the parents, they came here and they went to the K-12 council. They were literally shut out of the K-12 council. The meeting was shut down. Then we saw students walk out of the school. They came here to talk about 360. They went to K-12 council. They walked out. We've seen a pattern, and I'm not saying that that was the intent of the Department of Education or the commissioner. But I go back to what Dr. Morell told us. Dr. Morell told us that this is a risk. Vibrant communities like Newark, New Jersey, that had full auditoriums for school board meetings prior to takeovers, saw things kind of fade out and people not be involved. And I just, in closing, I want to say this. I think we have an opportunity here. I truly believe this. It's one of the things I wanted to stay and say. I don't think a return to local control has to just be about, yeah, this failed, this didn't work, this was bad, this was good. But what we have seen is passion. We've seen teachers show up. I'm going to go in reverse order of importance. We've seen families show up. We've seen students show up, whether it's a mayoral forum, whether it's a school committee meeting, whether it's a K-12 council meeting, whether it's social media, which is the cesspool that it is that I participate in. We still see people showing up to express their passion. And tonight, watching and listening to this, it was cathartic in a strange way. Board Member Newman, what you said captured a lot about the trauma that has happened. And we have Dr. Montañez, I mean, the best community builder that I've encountered in my career. Scott Sutherland, best operational leader that I've encountered in my career. Dr. Onye is here, an expert in restorative practice, in equity. We need restorative practice collectively. And I'll just say that as we go back to it as a participant in battles and bad vibes and just general overall feeling of powerlessness, thank you for giving us the opportunity to have this conversation, and hopefully a return to local control. What that looks like means that everybody's going to have a seat at the table, because the one thing that's been missing by well-intentioned people who did come here to help us have a better system was having everybody at the same table at the same time. Thank you for actually listening to me after this long meeting. I appreciate you all for all your long hours that you spend on this consult.
Are there any members of the public that perhaps missed their opportunity to sign up, that would like an opportunity to speak? No?
I want to say one thing.
We're moving on to the school board member comments, Ms. Aiken, so you could literally have that opportunity at on our next item right now. All right, so next item is school board member comments. Ms. Aiken?
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to also recognize the report for SchoolWorks and also the lack of self-reflection. I agree with that assessment of our school board here. That's not us. I've been in the education management field and public service fields for 17 years. I mean, you are leaders, every single one of you, and you motivate me every day to keep doing what we're doing. for the community. And it is about the community. It is about what the community wants, what we're hearing from the community, the students, the teachers, the parents. And, but we do need to self-reflect as a board member as well. And Bride needs to do some self-reflection as well. And, we won't be parting ways with the Department of Education. We're an educational institution. So, that collaboration, that partnership needs to get stronger. And I'm excited about that potential. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Aiken. Any further school board member comments? Ms. Newman?
I'll keep it brief because I feel like I talked more than I wanted to tonight, but I just want to say thank you. Mr. Spencer?
Censor.
Spencer?
No P. Censor.
Censor. That's a fly name, Censor. Okay, Censor. No, I mean, really, thank you so much. I'm so happy you stayed and endured what I thought was an amazing conversation. It gets tense at moments, but it's all because we care. All of us care. That's undoubtable. That's why my respect for every person in this room, even if I've had moments, I have moments with everyone, my own family, right? But it's normally because we care about something so deeply. So you got to go to bat for it. And it's folks like you and our teachers, you know what I mean? Our students, our families. And I'm always going to shout out Aubrey. She be here every month doing like so much. You just do so much. And I'm babbling now, but I'm tired, but I'm joyful and I'm happy. And I do want to say to our folks from RIDE who came up here and presented, it's no bad vibes. It's not ill intention. It's just passion. Mr. Montauk, like, it's not bad vibes. It's just passion. And I feel you. I feel where you're coming from too, So the one thing I will say about that report that I think is true related to the board is we're dealing with board constraints of, what is it, Robert's rules, right? So, some people are like, who the hell's Robert anyways, right? But like, I don't like that because I feel like it does prevent us from being able to get to know each other and have friendships and have some coffee and like actually build and collaborate. Like, that's the truth. The truth is that there are systematic things set up that prevent us from tapping into our humanity in a way that we know would be better for our families and our students. And I just want to say that out loud, is that is a fact, but I don't think that's anyone's fault who's in this room. It's systems and policies that precede all of us. And I do hope that when we transition, that it can be this collaborative spirit and that it isn't, bump ride, bump you people. Like, we can't, our students and families deserve more than that. So I think if we can just model that spirit of collaboration, we can take what has worked from the top, and address what hasn't and do it with fidelity and in community. And that's what I'm hoping to see. So thank you, Sensei. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Newman. Any other school board member comments? Oh, Secretary Hughes.
I'd just like to mention that the school board also received one set of written comments. I'm going to take my time to read that comment because it's from a parent and parent leader, and I think it's important context for us to think about. It's brief.
Sure.
Hello, Providence School Board President and esteemed members of the school board. My name is Asia Mosca. I have two awesome teens. My son recently graduated in June from Mount Pleasant, and my daughter is going to be in 12th grade this September. Since tonight is the school board meeting, I noticed on the agenda was a possible vote regarding PPSD's state control. I kindly ask you all to continue this discussion in future meetings so that all students, parents, guardians, school staff, and community members can hear what will be gone over tonight and give their feedback. As a parent in PPSD, I feel that the district should keep an open discussion with the community regarding this matter. The outcome of whether Providence schools should go back to the city is ultimately going to be a decision that all who are invested should be a part of. Engagement will play a big role in moving the district forward. So let's invest in the best part of PPSD, the students. Thank you all for your time. Asia Mosca, Mount Pleasant parent, volunteer, and CAB member. I wanted to highlight those comments from Mrs. Mosca because, one, she's an amazing volunteer. Aubrey will also second that. But because I think that our responsibility in no way ends with the vote on this resolution that we took tonight. I think that everyone is in agreement that things were not perfect throughout this intervention and that there were some precipitating things that led to the intervention taking place. Whether you agree that it should have happened in this way or if it was executed correctly isn't really the point, but I wish and hope that no one in this room or in this community feels that we want things to look exactly the same as they did before. And once again, I commend my fellow board members and our board leadership for trying to model a space where we are listening to folks and trying to hold people accountable, but in a respectful and professional way that moves the work forward. So I look forward to hearing from more parents, from families, from educators, from students, from community members. Please keep coming here to this space so we can help have that discussion. And I call upon the district, who is always here, many of you with your team, as well as our folks from RIDE and folks from the city, to leverage this space that is accessible to you. That please, when you are in our space, come and listen to what we have to say, but don't forget that the community is coming here and telling you what they need, telling you what their concerns are. Please help us use this space to keep people informed and to keep people feeling heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Hughes. Any other school board member comments? Mr. Stevens?
I just want to commend the school board on today for taking, in fact, a unanimous vote 9-0 on this matter. I think that, that definitely points the board in the right direction. There is progress that needs to be made on the school board's part, progress made on every part. So I'm not saying that it's the best decision to make, but I feel definitely confident. I know that there are other stakeholders that are involved with this decision. And the commission will overall make the recommendation, but I think, the 9-0 vote is pretty telling on where the community feels as if they want the district to go, and where the board feels as if they want the district to go. So I commend and applaud all of the board members definitely sticking together. It was a difficult process ahead of the meeting, and, you did a good job, President Rogel, trying to make sure everybody, felt comfortable with the resolution. So I applaud you and applaud all of the board members and the community as well, and RIDE and the presentation you guys presented. It wasn't what I anticipated. Like, I thought it was going to be a little bit worse than what you guys did, but you guys did an awesome job. So I applaud you all as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. All right, any other school board member comments? All right, let's move on to committee updates. Policy Committee, Secretary Hughes.
Oh, that's me again. Okay. So the policy committee met on Wednesday, August 7th, and we talked about a number of things. First, I want to highlight that later on in our agenda, we'll be reviewing and potentially adopting 3 policies. So the first policy that you see under 8.1 is the school closing policy. This is for second read and adoption. You might remember that we last talked about the school closing policy and had our first read, I believe, in our April school board meeting. We had it on our agenda for the May school board meeting and decided to continue it based on some additional public comments. I am really proud of our committee's work on this policy. This, as you know, the closing of schools has been a contentious and traumatic thing in our community for a long time, and the school board's previous policy that predates the intervention and predates probably most, if not all of us in this room participating in PPSD, it was from 1991. So this is a brand new policy. The only change that we've made since that April meeting is to add the word merger on page 1. So in our definitions, we talk about closure of a public school, phase out of a public school, staff, and a merger, and we added that into the notification and communication section. So that the part A reads, initial notification within 30 calendar days of the recommendation to initiate a school building's closure or phase out or merger, the following action shall be taken. So the thing that I think we should be most proud of as a board and as a policy committee is that this policy has had extensive review with the committee, with the board, but also internally with PPSD We've consulted with our legal department, we've consulted extensively with our operations department, with our family and community engagement department, probably some additional folks that I'm leaving out here. And we've even talked with RIDE in the commissioner's office. What our goal was as a committee was to formulate and develop a policy that was much more responsive to the community, but that also was realistic and that the district is ready and willing to implement now, even when we are in turnaround status. So what I think is really exciting about this is this gives us an opportunity to do some of the things that we talked about earlier tonight, to sort of start thinking about the board's role in a different way, that we've been able to help develop this policy that can sort of be used immediately in a transition period and demonstrate the board taking on additional legal and fiduciary responsibilities in that way. So the committee is recommending that for approval tonight. The second policy here is a reflection and prayer accommodation policy. That is here for first read. So we are asking, the policy committee is asking for the board to approve that first read, and so then that would come back to us for a second read likely next month. And that policy has been in development for a really long time. It's been probably over a year that there was an original prayer policy. There's been lots of consideration and reworking, both to make it as inclusive as possible, but also to ensure that it is not creating any legal or concerns around rights of students and staff. We have spent extensive time making sure that this policy is reflective of our broad, diverse community. And I think that's a really exciting space to be in. And then finally, the third policy that we're looking at tonight is the use of students' public information, materials, and media policy. That is also for a first read, meaning that we would see that policy one more time after tonight if we approve this first read. And that policy is actually the same as the policy that was already in place. No changes have been made, but our policy committee is trying to help work with the district to make sure that we don't find ourselves in a situation where we have exceptionally outdated policies. And so we're working our way as we can with some of the media policies, as well as policies that have been in place for a while, and revisiting them. So that is our recommendation there. And then the last two items that we discussed at the policy committee, we had a legislative update that evening from Mr. Scott. He gave us, James Scott, wanted to clarify that. And he gave us an update on various things that happened at the end of the legislative session, both at the General Assembly and the City of Providence. Updates about changes or lack thereof to the funding formula, updates to with both in general and with regard to MLL students. Also some legislation that allowed for the city to go out to bond for our phase 4 school construction projects, and talked about some of the funding that we heard about from the City of Providence. And then finally, we heard from a team from our curriculum department that talked us through some updates to that, and also addressed some specifics around climate change and our science curriculum and how that is addressed throughout our students' careers from grade K all the way up through high school. And the board has been provided with a memo with additional updates on that. And that is my policy committee update.
Thank you, Secretary Hughes. Next is Finance Committee, Chairwoman Megan.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, President Rachel. We had a thorough review of 2 contracts this evening. They were related to student health and tutoring services. One is for the Learn Well, which provides educational tutoring services for our students who are hospitalized at Bradley Hospital. And the other contract is for autism support services, which provides classroom supports and coaching for our students with disabilities. You will note there is an addendum on that autism support contract of a breakdown of the funding that outlines that first budget line item more in detail. And I am pleased to present these 2 contracts to you and the board for recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairwoman Aiken. Next is Health and Wellness Committee, Chairman Mahmood.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just scheduled a meeting with Chairman Aiken and Sandy the next week, Thursday. But I wanted to share a little bit what the Health and Awareness Committee will be focusing on this year. We're gonna be working on to create on another mental health fair. I'm hoping either this fall or another one. We have one this fall, another one in the spring. We're gonna be working to add another two subcommittee that's gonna be addressing substance use and bullying, and also we're gonna be continuing to work with Sodexo to advocate for cultural diversity school lunch.
Thank you, Chairman Mahingabu. Next is CTE Committee, Vice President Escobar.
No new updates, and then we will reconvene next week.
Thank
Mr. President, Travis, can you talk a little bit about AI tomorrow, that committee?
So, thank you for that question. That meeting has been rescheduled. Yeah.
That's good, I won't be in time.
Yeah, but I will say, Mr. Stevens and to the rest of the board, looking to collaborate with the district on AI. Folks might not know, but there's an AI task force statewide that's focused on. A good friend of mine, Chris Parisi, that he's like vice chair, and the chairperson is Jim Landrigan, right, former congressman there. And there's been a lot of focus on how does AI get, whether it's a new economy in general in terms of jobs. Even in my large company, I don't even know about smaller companies, but AI is being sort of like implemented in terms of just, you can use that for different work, social media, some other aspects of it too. And we know that students do use AI, whether that's in the classroom in the high school or in college. So there was some scheduling challenges. My hope before the end of the year is to have the district have a concrete plan moving forward around what are the sort of guidelines around AI, how do we implement it in the school, and is there areas where it can improve teaching and learning? One of the things I'm also interested in too is, we talk about, we're always looking to find and supports for MLL students, for example, right? Is there aspects around AI programming in the future where we obviously would prefer like bilingual educators, but are there aspects of programs where that could also be helpful for MLL? So unfortunately that it was rescheduled. I was excited for that. So it was more of a back end type of thing. But yeah, I think in general, it's the current aspect where we're at right now. And my hope is Providence Public Schools can be a leader among the educational system on that topic.
Thank you, Vice President Escobar. Next, we have Schools Building Committee. We have designee George Took.
Thank you, Chair Rogel. So the building committee met yesterday. We reviewed all phases of the capital plan 1 through 3, and I thought it might just be interesting for everybody to quickly go through all of the projects that are in 1 through 3. They're very impressive when you hear them all together. There's the projects that have already been completed and are open in our Ducci Learning Center, Debate Elementary School, and Spaziano Elementary School, all of which open in 2023. There are current projects in construction, including Pleasant View Elementary School PK through 5, which should be complete this summer and open for the school year, Superintendent? Yeah. Okay. And then the classical high school renovations are ongoing to be completed in fall of 2025. And Hope High School, almost complete. There's work and audiovisual equipment to be installed in the theater there to be completed during the fall of 2024. Then there's the projects in what's called pre-construction. So these are beautiful new schools that are going to come online in the next couple of years. There's the Spaziano Middle School, which will be built next to the Spaziano Elementary School, having a pre-K through 8 campus, and that building should be completed for next year's school year. And then 2 more for the following school year, the Kazarian pre-K through 8 and Fogarty pre-K through 8.
And then lastly, those that are in design development still, which would be target for the summer of 2027, opening for the 2027-2028 school year. The Lima pre-K through 8, the Messer West Broadway merge pre-K through 8, and then Mount Pleasant High School will also be completed, target of the summer of 2027. That's just capital phases 1 through 3. Ms. Hughes referenced capital plan phase 4, which is subject to a bond approval process that's going to be on the ballot in November. And I know all of us will do everything we can to make sure that that passes. That would be required to complete the TAP goal of getting all students into new or like new buildings by the year 2030. That's all.
Exciting stuff, Mr. Musa. Thank you for that update. All right, let's move on to action items or votes. So item 8.1, this is the school closure policy. This is the second reading adoption. Do I have a motion to approve?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there discussion on item 8.1?
Short discussion. I think this is an example of collaboration between the school board and the district. So thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Escobar, for shepherding this policy, and Secretary Hughes for your diligence vetting and committee. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. It's approved. Item 8.2. This is the reflection prayer accommodation policy first read, and I'll take item 8.2 and item 8.3 together. They're first reads. So let me read it first. Reflection prayer accommodation policy first read is item 8.2, 8.3. Use of students' public information materials and media policy first read. Do I have a motion to approve both? There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
It's a second by Chairman Mahingu. Is there discussion on either item?
Just have a question.
Chairwoman
The
Lee.
reflection portion of it, can you please describe a little more detail what that would mean for students who maybe don't have a higher belief system, or care not to partake in either reflection or prayer moments?
We're going to invite Dr. Onier to come and give a little more detail if she would like to do so, as she's been spearheading this policy to be responsive to all of our students and families and staff in the district. Thank you, Dr. Onier, for joining us tonight.
You're absolutely welcome. Can you hear me? Testing, can you hear me? Good evening, school board members, Superintendent, President Rivera. Your question, school board member Tony?
It's related to the reflection portion of the prayer accommodation for those students who may not opt to have a higher power or spiritual aspect and prefer to opt out of it.
Right. So this policy really is to, we try to our best to really accommodate students across the spectrum. And actually there's a and is missing between the reflection and prayer, which I think makes a difference. So it's the reflection and prayer accommodation policy. So for some students, it may be prayer, but for some students, it may just be an opportunity for them to just take a minute to meditate, to reflect. There's a lot of work happening now with in a lot of schools and classrooms around reflection, just giving students an opportunity to just kind of sit back and think about their day, think about their purpose, think about how they want to start their day at different points. So we want to make sure that all students are accommodated, whether they're religious or not. It would accommodate all students.
Thank you.
Any further discussion on either item 8.2 or 8.3? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Both items are approved on the first read. Items 9.1 and 9.2, do I have a motion to approve both items 9.1 and 9.2, Learn Well contract consideration, and then STAR Autism Support contract review? Is there a motion?
Motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
There's been a motion made and there's a second. Any discussion on either item, 9.1 or 9.2? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The contracts are approved. We already did item 10.1. And next is an executive session item pursuant to Rhode Island General Law 42-46-4 and 42-46-5A1 Superintendent's evaluation. Is there a motion to continue this item to the September meeting?
Motion.
There's a motion by Vice President Escobar and seconded by Mr. Stevens. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
And the motion in the matter has been continued. The meeting is adjourned.
Motion to adjourn.
We don't have to motion to adjourn. We don't have to motion to adjourn. You don't, there's a motion made by Vice President Escobar, seconded by Mrs. Stevens.